You guys quiet down a lot quicker than at the Economic Summit. Hello, good morning. Our speakers are still talking too. Sean, Mark. Well, everybody, thanks for coming out. This is a really full crowd. I didn't realize there's this much interest in a government program out there. So thanks for coming in this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Roger Zalmaretis. I'm the director of the La Plata Economic Development Alliance. The Alliance in Region 9 and the City of Durango helps all co-sponsor this event or co-host this event. So thank you guys for coming this morning to learn about more about opportunity zones here in Colorado. And I also wanted to thank our sponsors for this event too. Region 9, as I mentioned. 4F, that's Sean. Thank you guys, Sean, very much. Ourselves, the Alliance. First Southwest Bank. Do we have anybody from First Southwest Bank here? Yep. Thank you, Vernon. Thank you, Sherry. Colorado OEDIT. Ms. Jana. Thank you, Jana. And finally, the city. Yep, that's all of us. So, City of Durango. Thanks everybody for being sponsors for this event too. One of the folks presenting asked me a question, so I just want to show of hands here. How many people have a good understanding of what opportunity zones are or have heard of them before? How many of you haven't really, don't really know anything about opportunity zones? Let's start there. Got a few? Okay, so everybody's got, many people have a little bit of an understanding of opportunity zones. How many of you are in real estate? Yeah. How many of you own property or buildings and are interested? That's you, Ron. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any developers in the room? Okay, decent amount. And some government interests. I saw some legislative aides in here. Government interests. So any other legislative aides or government officials here? Okay. And anybody else that I didn't mention that has a profession? Housing. You're real estate, Lisa. Investors. Do we have any investors in the room? Okay, it's going to go. So that kind of gives you a sense for who's in here today. Somebody asked, is it all economic development people? I was like, no, we couldn't fill it. So, but anyway, thanks for coming out. We're going to have a kickoff. We're going to go through kind of an overview of opportunity zones, go into the fundamental, then go into what investments look like in them, and then also what attractive projects look like. It's going to take a couple hours. If we have a chance, we'll take a quick 10-minute break, probably toward the end of the second presentation. But I did want to kick us off with an intro from Jana Persky from OEDIT, the Office of Economic Development. She's a Strategic Initiatives Manager with the state office up there. She's working on opportunity zones with the other one that we were chatting about earlier. I think this is great. Her two projects are opportunity zones and blockchain regulation. So she actually, I now know 30 seconds worth of blockchain stuff, and we'll see if we can invite her back to tell more about that later. But Jana, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's really exciting to see so much interest and so much excitement in the Opportunity Zone program. I'm just going to go through pretty briefly what Opportunity Zones are at a very high level and some of the things that the state is doing to organize around it, and then how communities can organize around it, because we're really just trying to provide a little bit of the backbone and some of the support structures, but you know, for this to work, we're really going to need community engagement from all the different groups that Roger mentioned and that are in the room. So thank you to all the folks that helped with organizing this and bringing this together. So first question is, what are opportunity zones? And this is a little bit text heavy, but at a high level, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. Since, you know, as the country's come out of the recession, there's been parts of the country that have seen tremendous growth. And that's led to about $6 trillion of capital gains on balance sheets around the country. But as I'm sure all of you are aware, this recovery has been somewhat uneven. The wealth created has been concentrated in certain areas, you know, the urban areas, particularly the coastal areas. And so the Opportunity Zone incentive is intended to bring some of that capital and those gains and that wealth that's been created and redirect it to distressed communities across the state. So it's a federal incentive. It was part of the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the tax reform bill. And that bill passed, I think, with almost no Democratic support, but what's really interesting is that the opportunity zone piece of it had been kicked around for a couple years in a couple different forms, and that has tremendous bipartisan support. The key sponsors are Senator Cory Booker and Tim Scott, both sides of the aisle, who have worked really hard, and leaders kind of across the political spectrum have come out in favor of this provision. And so it's an incentive for investors to support distressed communities through long-term equity investments. And we'll talk more, and I'll turn it over to our legal experts to give more of the details on exactly what that means later. But what's exciting about this is it's place-based, patient investments, not just people coming in and looking to make a quick buck in your community, but really invest in your community because they will benefit from growth over the long term. And so we'll go through some of the potential benefits. But we really think as a state that, if done well and with proper engagement from communities across the state, this can really help us address some of the challenges that we see, particularly in rural parts of the state. So again, I'm going to leave it to the experts to go into the details, but just so people have a baseline of what we're talking about. The way opportunity zone investments work is that taxpayers take their capital gains, they invest their capital gains into an opportunity fund, and then the fund makes investments, most likely real estate and business investments, into opportunity zone property. And so we'll talk more about exactly what that means. That's the simple version of how the money flows. And again, the three benefits are mostly related to capital gains tax. The first is that if you can defer your original capital gains tax until the sale of your investment or December 31st, 2026. The second is a partial reduction of the deferred gain. And that basis, so if you invest in an opportunity fund and hold that investment for 5 years, the basis on the original investment increases by 10%, and then an additional 5% 2 years later. So again, incentivizing long-term investments, the incentive increases over time. And then the third benefit, which is the one that people tend to be most excited about, is that if you invest in an opportunity fund and hold that investment for 10 years, you pay no capital gains tax on the appreciation. So again, long-term patient investments really encouraging growth in the community. So at the top here I have Colorado's Opportunity Zone program, and I'll talk about that, but what's important to note is that at the federal level, this is just an incentive. So every state has opportunity zones designated, and it was up to the state governors to lead that nomination process. But now that the zones are designated, there's actually no government involvement. Private investors can go and make their investments, they can self-certify them to the IRS, and they can do all this without ever talking to the government. So if you want to leave and not talk to me ever again, you can do that and still benefit from this incentive. What we think in Colorado, though, is that just sitting back and drawing the zones on the map and not putting anything else around it isn't going to drive the type of impact that we want. So we're starting to build out a program to find ways to attract capital, all in support of the mission at the top, to position Colorado as a leading destination for capital in ways that will truly benefit communities. And so we see our work kind of falling across three streams. The first is the nomination process, and I'll talk briefly about that because I think it's important to set the foundation for the goals of the program, but I will preface all of this by saying the map is 100% set. We have no ability to add a zone, remove a zone, change a zone, redraw a boundary to hit this property. It's just not possible, and we're sorry about that, but want to be clear about that. The second is education, why we're all here today, just spreading the word and getting the right people in the room to think about how we can take advantage of this to benefit communities. And then the third is the actual investment facilitation and helping capital and projects find each other. So the nomination process was completed earlier this year. After the tax bill was passed, states had 3 months to nominate their zones, so everyone woke up on, right after New Year's and said, oh shoot, what do we do now? But I think Colorado, despite the short time frame, was pretty thoughtful in the way we designated our zones. There was kind of 3 main factors that we were thinking about because the way it worked was There are about 500 zones in Colorado that are eligible based on the Distressed Communities Index, and then the state was allowed to designate 25% of those. So we ended up with 126 zones. And the things that we were thinking about when choosing which zones to designate are kind of the three bubbles on the left here. The first is true economic distress. The metric that is used nationally was area median income, but that leads to some kind of funky results, like, for example, areas around universities tend to be designated as low income because students are low income, but in a lot of cases, those aren't the communities that actually need this incentive. And, you know, CU Boulder doesn't need an incentive for investment in that area. So making sure that there's true economic distress and economic need. The second was the ability to both attract and absorb private capital. So, you know, if a zone doesn't have anything in it, doesn't have the infrastructure, doesn't have the population, adding this incentive on it is going to be a waste. It's still just not going to attract investment. But on the flip side, we wanted to make sure that it was areas that could both attract and absorb that capital in a positive way. So for example, in the Denver area, the Rhino area of the city is already growing really fast. It doesn't need an additional incentive to attract investment. And in fact, that type of incentive might be detrimental because it might accelerate displacement and gentrification. So kind of trying to find that Goldilocks zone where additional incentive could be truly catalytic and truly beneficial to the community. And then the third thing we looked at was statewide equity. We built a model on kind of all of these different factors, and the way the original model came out was that 60 to 70% of the zones should be in the urban corridor and in the Front Range. But thinking about our state from a true, you know, economic development perspective, and where a lot of the governor's energies have been, and where, you know, where the areas that need a little bit more support, we know that that's in a lot of the rural areas. So we flipped that map. We talked to a lot of local stakeholders, including some of the folks in the room, to identify which are the rural areas that maybe the data doesn't give quite as much of a compelling story, but, you know, local people know that with this incentive we can develop this part or this downtown area, or this is great for an energy project. So we ended up with 126 zones, and you can see a better map on choosecolorado.com/OZ and kind of zoom around. But what's really cool is that I think it allows for a diverse portfolio of opportunities. You know, some of these areas out on the Eastern Plains, for example, are really well equipped for wind energy or infrastructure, ag. You know, some of the more urban areas are great for some housing projects. You know, there's kind of a mix of the types of investment that we can see across the state. And so we're really excited to bring kind of a diverse array of benefits. So then the second piece we're working on is just general education. We've had a couple large events in the Denver area. Both have had about 200 people. We've been out with, you know, we've had different events with different communities, like investors, developers. We've gone out to a bunch of different communities. I was counting the other day, and I think this is like number 12 on my 16 community road trip over the kind of a 6-week period. Just trying to get the word out and continue trainings for community leaders, for developers, so people can understand this. So the main thing I'll just point you to here is our website, choosecolorado.com. Has a bunch of great resources for explaining some of the details, for connecting to the right types of folks, for what to think about. And you can also sign up for an email update list there where we share event updates and you know, other news. And the third piece that we're working on is the facilitating investment. And this is in particular where we rely a lot on community support. But we're working with both sides of this sort of equation to connect investors to the investment opportunities. But the primary focus of our efforts is on the left side here, the investment opportunity, or the right side, I guess, and surfacing the investment opportunities. What we've heard, and you know, you can ask Sean about this later, is that there's more capital out there right now than there are projects. There's a lot of people looking for places to invest, and so communities that can organize themselves and can identify projects that they need and structure them in a way that are attractive to investors are not going to, you know, our theory is that they're going to have a pretty easy time attracting the capital. Now those first 2 steps aren't easy. There's definitely some work that goes into that, but we think that, you know, good opportunities will be able to find capital. And so I'll just briefly run through a couple of the tools that we have or will have available. And happy to answer questions on any of these. There's also more information on our website. But the first is the community prospectus template. And I think Laura's going to talk about this later because Region 9 has done a great job getting ahead of this. But we're encouraging communities to organize themselves and build a prospectus that tells the story of their community, their needs, what they have, their workforce, and orient that towards investors and telling the story of why an investment in your community is going to receive a return over 5, 7, 10 years. The second is technical support grants. This is through DOLA, and we're really grateful for their partnership, but they've made some money available for communities to apply for consultant help in the prospectus building or for particular projects. Hiring, working with a lawyer, an accountant, or a finance person to help structure the deal. Not necessarily go all the way through to the negotiation, but to, if you really want to build a housing project on this plot of land, to help you think through what that capital stack could look like, model out the returns, so that instead of going to investors and saying, we have this housing project, please invest, you can go to investors and say, we're looking for $5 million of equity, and here's the return that you're likely to see, and here's why, and kind of ease some of that friction. The third is pro bono consulting help. So we are fortunate to be tapped into some national folks that are thinking about opportunity zones, and so they can help kind of on either of these first two, particularly for projects that have broad community support and potential for broad community impact. And then the last two go together, but they're things that I'm really excited about, is we're building a statewide website that's going to have kind of two functions. One is marketing of opportunity zones. So at both the state, the regional, and then the community levels, it'll have this prospectus telling the story of why you should invest in Colorado and then in particular areas. And the state will be building out the state and regional piece of it, but then we'll be looking to communities to help us fill in the story of why Durango. What is the information that an investor need for Durango? And then the other side of this is going to be an actual database of potential investment opportunities. So investors can go and create a profile, and projects can go and create a profile, and then they can find each other. We call it kind of the dating site for investment, to help elevate some of these opportunities, both at the national and at the local level. And so those last two, hoping to launch right after Thanksgiving, and we've already seen really great interest in that. And so would love, that's what we're going to look for folks in this room. If you have projects, if you're an investor, if you're a fund, join our website and help kind of create that network of people and opportunities. So I talked briefly about this, and I won't take too much of what Laura is talking about, but the prospectus is the investment memorandum designed to attract capital to the community. And the main thing that I think is important to highlight here is that this isn't just your tourism brochure of we have nice people at a river downtown. It really needs to get a little bit more granular and a little bit into the data that will be meaningful to an investor. Not that your river and nice people aren't important, but telling that full story. And I have a couple examples of some of the national folks that have created those. In like South Bend, Indiana, and Erie, Pennsylvania have put a lot of work. And so if you're interested in looking more at those, they're on our website, or I printed a couple copies and happy to share after the presentation. I also mentioned the community grants. This is through DOLA, so the right person to talk to is the DOLA regional rep for each of these, and they do have to be through local government, so not available to private projects, but if it's something that the community is galvanizing around and the community wants to apply for, they can do that. And so I'll just kind of conclude with 5 messages to communities or 5 messages for opportunity zones, hopefully helping people wake up a little bit. But the first is to be proactive. And Mark and Jason will talk about this in a little bit, but if you kind of do the math in the calendar, in order to achieve maximum benefit, you have to invest by the end of 2019. This doesn't mean that we think investment will stop at that point. It's a small piece that falls off, and that 10-year hold, for example, is accessible for any investments made until 2026. But what this does mean is that there's going to be a lot of capital looking to move in the next 12 months, basically. And so communities and organizations that can organize themselves and elevate their projects will be able to have a seat at the table and kind of control the investment and benefit from the investment instead of just seeing it happen to them. I stole my own punchline a little bit, but the second is that urgency is key due to the perishability of this incentive and trying to move quickly. The third is to think like an investor. So I've been told not to leave this one up too much, lest people get offended. But I've heard a lot of people talk about opportunity zones in terms of, they won't make bad projects good. What they will do is make good projects a little bit better. The project still has to, in order to attract investment, show a case for why that investor will see a return. And we think impact-oriented investors will get involved. There's kind of a whole bunch of different layers, but the reality is, it does still have to be, this is a private incentive, and it does still have to be a project that is going to see a return in order to benefit. Which brings to number 4, layering on additional programs and incentives. So the Opportunity Zone program, or the Opportunity Zone incentive, works really well alongside enterprise zones, new market tax credits, that you can set up TIF districts. There's a whole bunch of different things that communities can do in order to increase the attractiveness of their projects and increase the return. One that's not even particularly high cost, but can be really beneficial to investors and developers, is fast-tracking permitting for Opportunity Zone projects, so that these projects can get through the pipeline quicker. And that can be a way, for example, to really show that your community supports this project and to increase the return for the investor. And then the final point is that opportunity zones are just one tool in the toolkit. So we don't expect opportunity zones, on their own to solve every problem that every community in Colorado has. And, as we'll talk about later, not every project is well suited for opportunity zones. But in the cases where it does fit, it can be a really beneficial incentive that can really raise the profile of projects, raise the return of projects, and help your community attract the type of investment that can truly make a positive difference. So I'll just end and leave this here, kind of things to keep in mind over the rest of the presentation and as we think about it. What does your community need? What does your community have available? And then how can you make those projects attractive? And that will be, take a lot of work from, the different folks and the different stakeholders in the room. But just some things to think about as we continue to go through this presentation and think about how opportunity zones can benefit the community. And then I guess I'll actually end with this one, which is the opportunity zones around this region. And there's maps printed in the back, and then our website, choosecolorado.com/OZ, allows you to zoom in really close and see. We also have, I don't know if this is kind of hard to see, but this is the actual Durango zone. But clearly there's a lot of opportunity, and we'll say that word many times today, but there's a lot of opportunity for Durango and the surrounding area to benefit from this opportunity zone. So really excited to be here and happy to help either today answer any questions, or if you have questions over the coming days, weeks, and months, please feel free to reach out, as this is something that our office is really making a priority and really excited about for Colorado. So thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. We're running a little ahead. There's something I forgot to mention, which is, first of all, I got Sean's company wrong. It's 4 Points Funding. It's one of our sponsors. Thank you, Sean. This is lack of coffee and a slight cold, so sorry. Yeah, anyway, so we're running a little ahead, so although we're going to generally reserve Q&A for the end, if anybody's got a quick question for Jana, we can take it right now. I've got one for her as well. But does anybody have a quick question for Jana at this point?
Do you perceive these being generally individual investors or institutional investors, or a bit of both?
So the question was, do we see this being individual investors or institutional investors? And I think, you should ask the rest of the panel this as well, but I think the answer is that we're going to see both. Right now, based on the way the regulations are, it's easiest to set up project-specific funds to invest specifically in a particular project, and so that's leading towards more individualized investments, I think. But the institutional investors are very interested in this and are, I think, trying to think about ways to make it work with multi-project funds and so the answer is I think we'll really see the range from institutional investors to individual investors to project-specific investors to impact investors, and it just depends on the type of project and how some of the regulations come out.
So my question, since it's been almost 12 hours since our last election, has there been any talk between the state and the federal delegation about making the Opportunity Zone permanent?
So the answer so far is no. There's actually already legislation in the House, and the question was, has there been any discussion about making the Opportunity Zone designation permanent? There's already been discussion in the House about renewing the Opportunity Zone bill, but I think the answer is it's too early for people to know the true impact of this. And so I think that if all goes well and this really benefits communities the way we think it could, there's definitely a chance in 5 or 10 years they renew the program and redraw the Opportunity Zone maps. There's also a chance that that doesn't happen, and it's kind of a one-off experiment. What I will say is that in its recent guidance, Treasury did clarify that you can make investments in these zones up until the end of 2026. And so even though like the census tracts are going to be redrawn in a couple of years and metrics could change, but this map is set for that time.
I have a quick question.
One more quick question, yes?
Do you anticipate that because there's the 10-year span on the funds being available, that we would see like the next 12 months, maybe like a huge investment, like you had said, but then it would drastically drop off because the 10-year, we wouldn't be able to accommodate that 10-year window because time is, past?
So you can invest up until 2026 and still get that 10-year tax-free appreciation.
Okay.
It's the initial deferral and basis increase on the initial investment that expires by the end of 2026. So that those two benefits basically fade away because you still get them, but you don't have enough time before 2026 to hit that 5-year, that 7-year period. But that 10-year appreciation, tax-free appreciation, applies on investments made up until the end of 2026.
Thank you, Gina. We'll have time for Q&A at the end as well, so if you have some more questions for her, some of those come up, feel free to ask her at the end. But thank you very much. So we're going to move along now to remembering to applaud. Yay! So we're going to move along now to Snell and Wilmer Law Firm. We have two people from there, Jason Brinkley and Mark Schultz. Mark Schultz, his practice is concentrated in federal, local, and state taxation matters, including complex transactions. Jason is focused on transactional law and practice in the areas of energy, real estate, and government relation matters. I will have to let you know that we'll need to take a little Q&A from Mark here as well. As many of you know, our air service is not ideal, and today is the one day in the week that American Airlines is not flying an afternoon flight back to Phoenix, so he has to leave right around lunchtime. So Mark, if you can just tell everybody what your technical expertise is, so if you have any questions related to what Mark's expertise is, we'll take some time to ask that toward the end of the presentation as well.
And we will make this quick. I just wanted to piggyback off something Janice said earlier. I am a fourth-generation Coloradan on the Eastern Plains, so from Lamar, just head straight east, about 7-8 hours. This program is very exciting for the Eastern Plains and the Western Slope and Southwestern Colorado. And I think to really enforce what Janice said, we have programs in Colorado that really encourage facilitation between private parties and governments and their communities to make sure that everybody's going in the same direction, whether that's a DOLA grant, best schools. I'm on the board of trustees for Great Outdoors Colorado with GoCo grants going all across the state, a lot in this community. Those are the types of things that can make private investment into the smaller communities on the Western Slope and the Eastern Plains of Colorado very attractive to not only local residents who are in a position to invest their capital gains, but outside folks as well. So I just wanted to hammer home how critical that kind of coming together as a community and really embodying that Colorado ethos that we all share is as we try to make this program successful, which I believe we can with all the help from Jana and the governor's office and all of you here today. So with that, I'll turn this over to Mark. Mark is truly the expert in tax. Just a little bit of background about our firm. We're headquartered in Phoenix, that's why Mark is going to Phoenix, but I'm a partner in Denver. We have 45 attorneys in Denver. We are the largest purely Western firm in the United States. Denver is the eastern edge of the empire, with offices in New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, California, Idaho. We have an office in Mexico and Washington, D.C. So with that, we're excited to be here, and I'll let Mark get us started on his technical expertise.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks to ODIT and Region 9 for inviting me to present today, and thank you for coming here. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm a tax attorney, and I specialize in federal incentives. I do a lot of new markets tax credit work, low-income housing, historic tax credits. I do a lot of sophisticated real estate transactions, and so this has just been and I do a lot of renewable energy. So this has been a easy fit for me, this particular program, because the rules are very similar. We give tax opinions on new markets tax credit deals, and a lot of these rules the requirements are exactly identical to the new markets tax credit program. So I come to Denver a lot, come to Colorado a lot, and it's kind of my second home. But I'm based in Phoenix and work with Jason a lot. So let's get started here. So like Janice said, that this is part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which passed last December 22nd. At one point, I'm going to move around. Let's see. At one point, this was a standalone bill. It was called the Investment and Opportunity Act. Little background about the Investment and Opportunity Act. Oh, it's not full. Let's see, just, yeah. Here we go. Good job. I would never have been able to do that. A group out of DC, a think tank called Economic Innovation Group, was created by a gentleman named Sean Parker from Facebook and Napster. And Sean Parker put, it was $15 million of his own money into EIG to come up with the solution. You know, being from the I don't think he grew up in Silicon Valley, but he made his millions in Silicon Valley. And so he decided that he tried to figure out why is there so much private capital in Silicon Valley, but not in many, many areas around the country. There's this dearth of private capital. So we created Economic Innovation Group with the intention of trying to solve this dearth of private capital problem. And he put $15 million of his own money in. He hired two tax policy folks, one from the Democratic side and one from the Republican side, Steve Glickman and Bob Lettieri. And no surprise if you bring in tax policy experts and we need an incentive, they came up with a tax incentive, right? And so this tax incentive was an incentive for private individuals to invest in these particular areas around the country. So they created the Investment and Opportunity Act. They actually created it in 2015, but they grabbed Senator Scott, Senator Booker, Congressman Kind, and Congressman Teaberry. So they had bipartisan, 4 folks from both sides of the aisle, created this legislation called the Investment and Opportunity Act. We had some momentum in 2016, but because of healthcare, Congress did a 180, and so this got shelved. And so that was, wait, hold on, let me step back. Because it was an election in 2016, this got shelved. Then we had momentum in 2017 with almost 100 co-sponsors. And then that's because Congress decided to take up health care, this got shelved. And so it sat there, and in the tax credit financing circles, we kept hearing about this legislation, and then all of a sudden we had the 3 months of debate on tax reform in the fall of 2017, and fortunately, we had a House bill, we had a Senate bill. The House bill stripped out almost all incentives. If I remember correctly, I don't even think municipal bonds the tax exemption for municipal bonds was in the House bill. But fortunately, the way politics works is the Senate bill prevailed, and in the Senate bill, we had this provision, this Investment and Opportunity Act was adopted in the Senate bill, and Senator Tim Scott was sitting on the Senate Finance Committee. So that's the tax writing committee. Because Senator Scott was sitting on that, he was able to get enough support to keep this in the Senate bill, and then December 22nd, 2017, this passes as the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Now, as Janice said, it had no Democratic support, but again, when this was a standalone bill, we had almost 100 co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle. So December 22nd, 2017, this passes. All the states are on the time clock because you have 90 days to submit your nominations, and you can get a 30-day extension. So a lot of states were, whenever you pass legislation before 2 holidays, no one reads anything until after the holidays are over, and then even past that. And so a lot of states, were a little bit behind the 8 ball and getting started. And so I think it was 15 states submitted within those 90 days, and then the other 35 took the extension. So. But by, I think it was March or April, maybe it was April, May, we had all the states submitted their zones, submitted their designations, and we had certification by Treasury, and so now it was, okay, what is this program, and how do we get started? And so let's talk about the incentives here. Well, here, we'll talk about the structure first. The original legislation was just purely an incentive for investors to invest in these projects, whether it was an operating business or a real estate project. And when Congress got intimately involved in this, they decided that they needed an intermediary, a fund. So the investors invest in the fund invests in the project or the business. So that is the structure here. So we created this whole industry involving opportunity funds. So it's a little bit more complicated, but we've got this intermediary. The intermediary has compliance requirements, has accountability to the investors, the projects, and ultimately the government. So that is the structure.
And Mark McKeon there, based on the show of hands earlier, it seemed like there were quite a few real estate folks in here, real estate related, and so when Mark's talking about or you're hearing about the intermediary, there's some similarities to the 1031 that you can utilize. Now, the similarities aren't straight across the board and they don't match up exactly. A couple examples, and Mark can go into this further, but unlike a true 1031, you don't have to put in all the proceeds of the transaction. You can sell your asset and just invest the capital gains and then pull your basis back out in this transaction. And you don't have to go after like-kind property. So classic example in Colorado, let's say, you have an agricultural family who's sitting on generations worth of farmland, and you're no longer wanting, or maybe you're looking to downsize the farming operation. You can sell some of that ag land, take your capital gains, go invest in a housing project or an operating business in an opportunity zone. So there are some similarities, but there's a whole lot of differences as well.
And if you have, I know we said we'll hold questions to the end, but if you have questions, just ask them. Raise your hand, and just so we can get a sense of where we are, what we're missing. So just feel free to ask a question right there.
Are these investments, do they have to be new investments, or if people have existing investments with a basis in it, how does that work?
The idea is that it's a new investment. Now, if you have older property, there's ways to structure that. So we'll get into like what qualifying property is, but generally it's real estate, it's assets you buy after 2017. So if you have something that's pre-2018, you have to go through a little bit of a structuring process, but there's a way to get, we do have ways that you can take 2017 property or pre-2018 property and make this work. So.
I think you mentioned in the beginning that they self-designated opportunity zone? Is that correct?
You mean the funds? There is a
I mean,
self-certification.
funds, yes.
Yeah, we'll
So
get
an
into that too.
investor can just say, okay, I'm creating my own
Yeah.
and doing this. They don't have to have a community fund established.
They do not, but there are some compliance issues, and so
Are those more difficult?
it's not the simplest program. You know, you have to spend some money hiring an accountant that understands this. You'll probably become pretty familiar with your accountant and trying to manage these tests. And you know, again, it's not made to be the simplest program. You know, but so you have to consider whether you can handle the compliance issues versus investing with a fund that's going to do that all for you. You know, so I'll get into that, and then we'll see what your question is after that. So let's just talk about the tax benefits. Okay, so here are the tax benefits. Okay, and I'm going to go to an example where I bought Apple stock for $1 million and I sell it for $3 million. Okay. So I buy it 10 years ago, I sell it for $3 million now. And so if I do nothing, I'm going to pay tax next April when I file my tax return for this year on $2 million of gain. Okay. If I invest in a fund, I don't have to pay tax next year. I won't pay tax until it doesn't become subject to income for me until December 31st, 2026. So that means when I file that tax return for 2026, I'm going to report on my $2 million of gain. Now, if I invest in the program this year or next year, when I file my income tax return and report on $2 million of gain, it'll be on 85% of $2 million of gain. And if I invest in 2020 or 2021, it'll be on 90% of the $2 million of gain. If I invest in 2022 or later, I just get the deferral, I don't get the reduction of gain. So those are the first two benefits. The third benefit is, if I put my $2 million in the fund, and the fund does great things with it, my $2 million becomes worth $5 million. And then I sell my interest in the fund for $5 million, I have $3 million of growth. That is tax-free. So, like Janet was saying, that you still have to have a project that pencils out. This is what we call a shallow subsidy. It's not like I do a lot of these new market tax credit deals. I do a $10 million deal. The developer gets $2 million of subsidy. This is a shallow subsidy. It's a subsidy on the investor. So the deal has to still pencil out. There's a lot of value in these first two benefits, but a lot of people just focus on this one right here. The other thing I thought was interesting is, unlike other programs where there's a cap on how much project costs, like in the new market tax credit program, it's $3.5 billion of cost per year. There's no cap on this program whatsoever. There's a theoretical cap. As soon as folks don't have capital gains, we're not going to have investors. But EIG, when they did their study on, what is that, they came up with $6 trillion. So it's really an unlimited capital supply. And then the question is, what gains qualify? And I'll just touch on this. The regulations, so a lot of folks were like, okay, the provisions just say the word gain. The title to the provisions say the word capital gain. But when the regulations came out a couple weeks ago, they clarified that it's just capital gains. So we're talking about long-term, short-term capital gains. If you sell inventory, that's not going to qualify. So like I got a call from a home builder, and they're constantly selling single-family homes. That's not going to qualify. That's considered inventory, not capital gains. And then the last thing is this tax attributes being retained. So I tell folks all the time, we have some confusion in the regs of what this meant when they said that the attributes carry over to the later years. My interpretation of that is that you're going to pay, when I say you pay later, you're going to pay your tax in 2026, it's going to be on the tax rates in 2026. So presumably those might go up, especially if you have a short-term capital gain, which is the same, which is taxed at ordinary income tax rates. So to the extent that goes up, that's something you have to factor as an investor. so there's a hedge on that, and that's that 15%, right? The reduction you get in your capital gain should hedge against the risk that the tax rates go up. So that's it on this one. So here, the question is like, so what is this sale that generates the capital gain? And so, simple answer is you have to sell something to an unrelated person, okay? And you have to sell something before December 31st, 2026. So that is the last day that you're gonna, so December 31st, 2026 is the last time you can sell something and get into the program. But it's a lot of runway. I mean, we're talking about 8 years of runway on this program, which is enough. I mean, people think that if you have anything that's good for 5 years, you can build an industry around it. And so this is, 8 years. And so you'll still have investments that are in 2027 because you have 180 days from the time you sell something to invest in a fund. So I sell something on December 31st, 2026. If I count that out, I think I have till June 29th, 2027 to invest in a fund. So,
180 days, is that how long the fund has to invest the money that's put in?
no, that's how long you have to get into the fund.
The fund can hold the money, it's not immediate.
They'll hold it for a certain period of time. They have to deploy fairly quickly. Yeah. But
There's some tests.
yeah, there's some tests, and this is where I get into all the compliance issues. And I'm not going to go into like a lot of detail. It's as much detail as folks want. But you have 180 days to get into the fund.
And I would just say this, because this is a question you get quite a bit, and it relates to this. The 10-year hold period is kind of a tough hold period for a lot of institutional investors. They like to operate on 5 to 7 or 3 to 5. And so they always come back and ask, is there any way that we can structure the deal where our tax benefits would run to the person that we sell our fund to? And the answer to that is no. These run to the individual taxpayer, and the next slide will show you who the eligible taxpayers are. But it's your capital gain. It's not something you can. I guess you could arguably structure the pricing of the deal to capture some of that, but that is there's no mechanism in place for you to pass off your capital gain treatment to somebody in the United States.
That's a good point. So this slide here just shows you the broad range of taxpayers we have to invest in this program. So a lot of people are thinking individuals, but that $6 trillion number that EIG came up with. Originally, they came up with a $2 to $3 trillion number, only looking at individuals and trusts, and then they forgot that corporations also have capital gains. Like, large publicly traded companies might sell a subsidiary, and they have a capital gain, and they can also participate. So that's what got us to the $6 trillion number. And then the 180-day period. So a couple things that we learned in the regs. So if I have my $2 million capital gain, I have to make an election. I can make multiple elections. So I can invest, I can basically say, okay, I'm going to invest $500,000 of my gain in 4 different funds. So that was something folks didn't know about. So I can break up my gain. That was really important, because it gives you flexibility to diversify your investments in different funds. And then they provided a special 180-day rule for folks in a partnership. I think that's 2 slides up. There we go. So, oh, here we go. So here's something that when the regs came out, what they did, so there's 3 sets of where we need guidance. One is from the investors investing in the fund. The other is from the fund investing in businesses and real estate projects. And then the second is the business and the real estate project qualifying. And so the regs did a really good job with the first step, and that's telling us about the investor's relationship with the fund. And so one of the things that they did was they said, okay, if I'm an investor in a private equity fund, so it's a pass-through entity, so the fund itself doesn't pay tax. It just basically it gives me a K1 with my tax attribute, you know, like it says you've got this much in gain, you've got this, you know, at the end of the year, they give you this K1. So what they said is that if the fund itself sells property for a gain, the partnership sells something for a gain, the partnership can invest in the fund directly, or the partners in the partnership can invest in the fund directly. And this was key because a lot of folks are like, you know, you might be an investor in a hedge fund, and every day that hedge fund has some gain. And so now the hedge fund might not participate in the opportunity fund, but you as an investor in the hedge fund can participate in the opportunity fund by the fact that there's a gain at the hedge fund level. So what they did is they said that if I'm an investor in a partnership and that partnership has a gain, I don't start my 180-day clock until the last day of the partnership's tax year. So here's an example. January of this year, Jason and I are in an LLC. The LLC sells property for a gain. The LLC does not invest in the fund, but Jason and I, we each get allocated $500,000 of gain. We don't start our 180-day clock until December 31st of this year. So we can invest. So a lot of folks thought that they were like, oh my God, I was in this LLC, it sold property, I missed the 180-day clock. You didn't miss it. So you don't start your 180 days until December 31st. You can also elect to have the partnership's 180 days. So they gave us a lot of flexibility in this area. So that was actually huge because that kept a lot of folks in play. And then the idea here is that you have to take an equity interest in the fund. You can't loan money to the fund and be considered, you know, an eligible investor. So that's a key thing. Oh, okay. The other thing is, so one of the things here's one of the differences, and Jason touched on this. What's the difference between this and a 1031? So if I bought, first of all, I couldn't sell Apple stock and do a 1031. I have to sell real estate and do a 1031. But if I bought real estate for $1 million, sold it for $3 million, and I wanted to defer 100% of my $2 million of gain, I've got to invest $3 million in the new real estate. I've got to take everything and put it in the new real estate. Here I'm just investing the $2 million piece. So I keep the $1 million. The second thing is with a 1031, you have a whole escrow, and you never touch the cash. You have 180 days to buy this new property, but you never touch the cash. It's sitting in an escrow account. Here, we don't have that. You just have 180 days to come to the table with $2 million, and you can get a loan and invest the loan proceeds in the fund. So that was one of the things that I wasn't sure about that when people would ask me a question. I'm like, I think that's going to be the case, but I just, I guess you could come up with abusive situations with that. But they said that's fine. So if you get loan proceeds within 180 days, so you take your $2 million. In fact, I speak a lot around the country right now, and I've been going up to Nevada. Folks always ask me these hypotheticals. Well, if I go to the casino with $2 million and I blow it, can I still invest? I'm like, yeah, if you can get within 180 days, if you can get $2 million to invest in the fund, you're good. So that was something that they did. So these were very investor-friendly regulations. So
with the whole purpose being you want to encourage the placement of private capital out into these distressed areas. And that is the underlying premise, and we can get into that.
So here's a big one too, because I get this question a lot from folks, and they say, okay, I have a gain of $2 million, and what happens if the fund loses all my money? Okay, well, do I still have to pay gain on that $2 million? And the answer is no. Now, what happens on December 31st, 2026, if my $2 million, my investment of $2 million is only worth $500,000? That seems unfair that I pay tax on $2 million. Well, the brilliance of this legislation was the answer is you pay tax on $500,000. So you have downside risk protection with this program. So on December 31st, 2026, if we're in a down market, and I know real estate folks never want to hear the word down market, if we're in a down market, folks are going to go get appraisals, and you're going to pay tax on the lesser of the $2 million or whatever that value of your $2 million is. So And then let's skip over this. Let's see. Let's get back to this. So here was another, here's another thing that the regs did. So the Opportunity Zone legislation talks about these designations only being good for 10 years. So everybody wondered, what does that mean? So does that mean that this ozone, are we in an ozone right here? I think we are, right? So this ozone only has a designation for 10 years. So what in the world does that mean? Does that mean that after 10 years I don't enjoy the appreciation on my investment? And so folks asked Treasury that question, and they didn't really answer it directly, but they did say that, that your 10-year benefit is good until December 31st, 2047. So you keep riding the appreciation all the way up to the end of 2047, but you have to sell your interest by the end of 2047. So if you create your own fund, you don't have to sell at 10 years. And if your investment keeps climbing in value, perhaps you're just going to sit on it and just enjoy that tax-free growth. So.
And to the question that was raised earlier to Jana about what do we expect? Do we expect individual investors or institutional investors? And I think, one, because of the runway and all the benefits of the program, the runway, and then this 2047 billing, you can see some creative estate planning or wealth management structure for individual investors to really take advantage of that and for generational wealth to occur. So I think for a whole lot of reasons, you're going to see a good mix of both individual investment and institutional investment in this program.
Now, and the last point here is, so if you do the math, you have income tax to pay before you hit your 10-year benefit, right? So if I invest in a fund this year, I'm not going to hit my 10-year benefit until 2028. But I have income tax I got to pay before that, right? So there's what we call the phantom income tax issue. So, funds are talking about, okay, if you invest in the fund, perhaps what we'll do is we'll do some type of refinancing and make a distribution to the investor so that you have cash to pay your taxes. I know I was talking to one of the banks in New York, and they're talking about perhaps having a product where they loan investors the money to pay their taxes. So that's one of the issues that, one of the issues with this 2026 date is it doesn't match up with your 10-year date. There's some funny stories that we've heard about this. Some people think that, remember this was drafted in 2016, so a lot of folks were like, okay, well that was 10 years out, right? And so when they got this adopted in the midnight hours of late 2017, they just pulled it off the shelf and just said, okay, we're getting it into tax reform. And so no one read it over and said, well, should we change 2026 to 2028? And, but that's making sausage in D.C. So.
And to go along those lines, as Mark and I are both attorneys, nothing better than getting a document that has defined terms being used that aren't defined, dates that don't match up.
Sections, the statute, the legislation.
Without period, so that was well.
Yeah.
That was a great example of how that works. So to Mark's point, a lot of sausage will be made.
Yeah, I think there's like 10 typos in the legislation. And so here's just a timeline, so you've got, you sell an asset, you have 180 days, you get into the investment, at the 5-year mark, so at the 5-year mark, you earn some reduction of that gain. At the 7-year mark, you earn additional reduction of the gain. And then December 31st, 2026, you have an income inclusion. And then you hold it longer and you hit your 10-year benefit. So that's just basically just highlighting that. And then I think we can give the example. Just a little thing on Janet, I don't remember if you talked about just what, how these zones, how they separate. So the country is divided into 75,000 census tracts. And so so the census tracts, every time we do a census, you have all this new economic data for each of these census tracts. And so what they did is they said, okay, if you have a census tract where you have a poverty rate of more than 20% or a median income, family median income of 80% or less of the statewide family median income, then that tract qualified. So if you, based on that criteria, 37% of the tracts in the U.S. qualify for this program. It's the same for new market tax credits, so same exact criteria. And then every governor got to nominate 25% of those 37%. So here, what was the number of how many were eligible, the tracks? It was
About 530.
530, okay, yeah. Yeah, and then there was this category of 5% of the tracks that you nominated could be tracks that did not meet the economic criteria, but they were contiguous with the track that was nominated, certified, and the disparity in family median income was no more than 125%. How many tracks did you guys have that?
I think we only ended up with a very small number.
Yeah.
I think it was 4 or 5. and
Yeah,
most of
that
them
sounds right.
Qualified in both cases.
Oh, they did? Oh, that's great.
In Colorado, I think it's really thoughtful job. 78% of the eligible tracks were in urban areas. When the final nominations came out, there were a lot of conversations, I'm sure with some people in this room as well, in selecting the nominations. And 60% of the nominated tracks are rural. With recognition that our farm range urban corridors didn't meet the incentive as much, right? So to flip that scale and give some extra incentive for our rural communities was really important.
And we'll go through here in a second the slides kind of showing overlay of all the state. And to Janice's point earlier, you know, if there's something that you, as an individual investor, would want to do in Durango or LaPlata County or the neighboring counties, but maybe that project or that kind of project type has already been accelerated, there might not be a consumption point for it. You could look up into another zone throughout the western slope or the eastern plains. So the governor's office did do a great job spreading equity around the state.
Very good job. Yeah. Okay, so what is a fund, right? So this is the magic question, right? So, you know, so it's basically you're forming a corporation or a partnership for tax purposes. So it could be an LLC, limited partnership. If you're going the partnership route, you have to have more than one partner or member. That's the key thing, okay? And it is a self-certification process. It's a form, it's an 8996 form that you attach to the tax return for the year that you form the fund. And then there's a 90% requirement. This is the most important requirement here, is meeting this 90% test, because if you don't meet it, you get a penalty. And it's a penalty of 5% of your assets. It's actually 5% of the shortfall of 90%. So if you have 100 million into a fund and you're supposed to, you know, meet that 90% test, that's 90 million. If you have zero meet, you know, you're looking at 5% of 90 million. That's a big penalty. That's an annual penalty. And I talked a little bit about this already. The key thing here is, if you set up a fund today, your first testing date is December 31st. Okay, so go up one more slide. So here's the thing. So you have to meet this 90% requirement. So 90% of your assets have to be what's called opportunity zone property, and you test it at the 6-month mark and the last day of the year. And so we were hoping that you would get, no matter when you form no matter when the fund is formed, that you would have 6 months. But the answer to that was no. If you form a fund at the latter half of the year, your first testing date is December 31st. So a lot of folks right now are like, okay, I'm going to wait till January 1st because I don't have enough time to make sure I do everything right in the short stub period we have this year. So a lot of folks are just saying, okay, January 1st is my go date. Here. No, I covered that already. Let's see. And then 90% test is, so 90% of your assets have to be qualified. They came up with this weird thing talking about if you have a financial statement, if you're required by the government requires you to have what we call an applicable financial statement, or if your bank requires you to have a certified audited financial statement, you look for the 90% test, you look at the values on that financial statement. If you don't have that, you look to the cost of your assets. And this is where the regs are very deficient, because they didn't give us a definition of what do they mean. Cost means different things for accounting purposes and tax purposes. So we're kind of left with a lack of clarity here, but we think the next set of regs that are coming out, probably at the end of December, early January, will clarify that. This is the penalty. So here is, so the structure of what this looks like. There's two structures here. There's one where the fund goes and buys assets. And then there's another where the fund goes and invests in a business that goes and buys assets. So the key thing here is, under the direct approach, if a fund goes and buys assets, those assets have to be what's called opportunity zone business property to be qualifying under the 90% test. If the fund goes and invests in an entity here, that entity, 70% of its tangible assets have to be opportunity zone business property. So this is the most important definition in this program, is what is opportunity zone business property. And that means, I'm going to flip around here, especially to real estate folks, this is going to be really important. So what that means is tangible property purchased, so acquired by purchase. So this is a big deal because a lot of folks are asking about leasing, and it's not acquired by lease, it's acquired by purchase from an unrelated party after December 31st, 2017, okay? So this is key, right? This is key if I have some property that's pre-2018, you know, how do I make this work? Because that is not opportunity zone business property. And then I have to be the original user of that property in the zone, okay? So if I go out to Cherry Creek, which I'm guessing is not an opportunity zone, right? and I find some, and I go and find some used equipment, and I bring it to an opportunity zone, I'm probably the original user of that equipment in an opportunity zone. But with real estate, I can't move it, right? And so it's already sitting in the opportunity zone. So I can't be, because real estate is permanent, I can't be the original user of the real estate in the opportunity zone. So there's an alternative test to this. So for real estate, the alternative is I need to substantially improve the real estate, okay? So what that means is I need to double, whatever I bought the real estate for, I need to put more into the real estate in improving the real estate than I did to purchase the real estate. So if I buy something for $1 million, I need to put $1 million, I need to put more than $1 million in improving the real estate. So this is a big deal to the real estate folks, right? Because you got to think through this. I go and buy land for $1 million, I need to put more than $1 million in improving it. I have 30 months to do that, to put that in, and it's any 30-month period, which is good. And so I have a lot of flexibility, but I've got 30 months to double my basis, to more than double my basis. So one of the things that you'll hear about, you'll be like, well, I've heard that there's this special rule for when I acquire a building. So the regulations put in place this special rule. So if I acquire land in a building, folks like me, tax attorneys, we still can't figure out the logic behind this, because this is truly a situation where Treasury is making up law. So because it doesn't meet the logic, but it basically says if I buy land in a building, so if I buy land for $1 million, building for $500,000, I pay $1.5 million. To meet the substantial improvement test, all I need to do is double the basis of the building. So all I have to do is put the $500,000 in. Again, there's no logic behind it, because now folks are like, okay, well, how did you get there? Logically, because what did you do? So you're saying that land doesn't need to be substantially improved. So we're waiting to see what Treasury says about that, because I've got a bunch of people calling me and saying, okay, if land doesn't need to be substantially improved, can I just go buy land and just do nothing with it? I'm like, no, you have to operate a trade or business on the land. And then the counter is, okay, I'm going to pave it and I'm going to make it a parking lot. And I'm like, that's not the intention of the program. So we're going to see how this plays out with this special rule here. And they gave us a hypothetical, they gave us a revenue ruling, which is, they gave us a fact situation, and it dealt with it was the purchase of an old factory building, and that was sitting vacant, and they bought it for, I think it was 60-40 split between land and the building. So, they bought it for $1 million, they paid $400,000 for the building, $600,000 for the land. They were turning it into a residential rental building, so they just doubled the basis of the building, and that qualified. So special rule, but only for buildings. So, question?
Just a quick question. How does it work if, say, the land is leased, but the tenant then puts on a building that would be considered theirs?
It's a great question. So we're working with one of the tribes because that's how tribal land is developed, right? It's all through ground leasing. And we submitted comments to Treasury a couple of months ago. We're probably going to submit more comments on this. So we think, so on land leasing, you've got this test here. So you've got this so let me just go back. Let me do something really quickly, and then I'll go right to that question, because I want to talk about the indirect approach. So I said that at the direct approach, you have a 90% requirement. If you do the indirect approach, you have these requirements. This is where the fund invests in a business, right? So it's not a business, it could be a real estate business. It could be a special purpose entity that's holding real estate. So when you do that, that lower tiered entity needs to meet a bunch of requirements. Well, one of the requirements is, I'm going to go right to here. One of the requirements is you look at your tangible property, and substantially all of it has to be opportunities on business property, okay? So they told us that means 70%. So at the upper tier level, it's a 90% test. At the lower tier level, it's a 70% test. So 70% of your property has to be opportunities on business property. And again, that means acquired by purchase. So that's one of the issues. The next test, we have an intangible test, we have this gross income test. But let's just talk about your question. So that means 70% of my property has to be good property. And let me go. Let's see. So, no, hold on, sorry. Let's go back to, nope. Okay, what did I just do? I'm like dangerous, I'm dangerous with technology.
So if you do enough lower tier entities, can you eventually get yourself to a 0% NZO?
No, unfortunately, you can only do one. You can't do but the 70% test, remember I said that you look at your financial statement. So this is what I've learned, because I'm not an accountant, I'm just a tax attorney. But leases now are treated as assets on accounting statements. So before it was like if I do a ground lease, it was treated as zero, so it was a great result, right? Because you have to meet 70% test, right? So your denominator it would be a zero in your denominator, so a lease would not hurt you. Now a lease hurts you because it's an asset. So then the question is, what does it mean from a cost perspective? Like, do I have a cost in a lease? And that's the question that we're asking Treasury, because they didn't give us a definition of what that means. We're hoping, we know what you have zero income tax basis in a lease, so our comments to Treasury have been, let's use income tax basis for all these measurements, because I've got zero income tax basis in a lease, and if you do that, I don't have to worry about leasing. Because leasing is not a good asset or a bad asset. It shows up as a zero, so everything I build on top of it would qualify. That's our call. Yeah. So just going back to the indirect approach here, how much time do we have? Oh, okay, good. Okay. So under the indirect, so we think all these deals are going to be done using the indirect approach. Okay. And the reason that we think that is because if you invest in the fund, right? So if you invest in the fund has to get rid of its money. So cash is a bad asset at the fund level, okay? Cash and intangibles. The only thing that's a good asset is a tangible asset. So if I'm building something and I've got a bunch of cash and I hit one of the testing dates, I'm going to be in a penalty situation. So it's really hard to do anything with the fund at the fund level. What Treasury did is they gave us a safe harbor at the lower tier level on the cash. So cash, we have the ability to keep the cash and it doesn't hurt us at the lower tiered level. And that is, I know I'm moving around a little here, but let me just. So they gave us this. So there's another test at the lower tiered level on cash. I can't have 5% or more of my assets at the lower tiered level in cash, okay? So that sounds even worse than at the upper tier level. But what they did is they gave us, we have an exception to that rule for reasonable working capital, and they gave us a safe harbor for that. And they basically said, if you take the money and you put it into the lower tier level, and you have a written plan of what you're going to do with that money over 31 months, and they didn't tell us exactly how specific you have to be on the plan. I mean, so, can you, they give us an example where they put the money in the lower tier, within 1 month they bought the property, within 30 more months they improved the property. So by doing that, the cash became a good asset. It became reasonable working capital. And so all these deals for the real estate industry are going to get structured using this indirect approach, right? So you have
Can you explain the 2 tiers again?
Yes. Okay. So you have the fund, and we have a diagram here. Oops. There we go. So you're going to have the fund. Okay, that's at 90% F. Now you're going to have this lower tiered entity. So your investors come into the fund, and then the fund is going to take the cash and make an equity investment to this, we call it opportunity zone business, and that's where all these requirements are, including that 5% cash requirement, the 70% requirement. We have some other requirements that, I won't go into, but that, so this is the way these deals are going to get structured. There's also at this level, there's a prohibition on sin businesses. So that's another, I know we have a slide on that.
And Mark, just to clarify, what you're saying is that even for real estate type investments, the fund is going to invest in that forward
That's right.
that is then going to make the direct sort of management
Correct.
of the real estate.
Correct. So we're setting up for a lot of folks who have an identified real estate project. We have to set up 2 entities for them. We set up a fund for them. We set up a lower tiered entity. Their investors are investing in the fund, and then the fund is investing in the lower tiered entity. And that's how these deals are all getting structured. We have all these tests we have to meet, and then there's a prohibition on sin businesses at the lower tier. Interesting, it's only at the lower tier level. And this definition has been in the tax code since like the 80s. So some of the terminology, it's for some reason every time Congress wants to do a prohibition on a sin business, they haven't re-upped their definition of a sin business in like 30 years. So we have, yes, marijuana. It's a great question. There's so many other provisions in the tax code that prohibit like depreciation for marijuana and everything. So I'm telling folks, don't do this for marijuana. Even though it's not one of the listed prohibitions here. But it's funny, whenever I do this in Las Vegas, people just are outraged with this slide. Maybe that's why Senator Heller lost last night, right? You have a question?
So what about agriculture?
No, that's good, actually. So that's not a sin business here. Now, in new markets, we can't. Yes, yeah. I guess it depends on what you got. Yeah.
But in general, like you could buy a piece of land, convert it into a farm, and like.
Well, so that's one of the issues. I have that fact pattern too, because folks are like, okay, so if I don't have to substantially improve the land, which again, this revenue ruling that came out, it's very controversial, right? It's basically saying that you have I buy a building, I only have to improve the building. And so like a lot of folks, including myself, are saying, show me the logic. What do you have to do with the land? And so if you don't need to improve the land, then the only requirement is you have to operate a trade or business on the land. So the next question I'm getting is, can I just buy land and farm it, hold it forever, and then if it appreciates, I'll sell it? I think the answer is going to be no. I mean, I think like if you go buy a farm with a barn, I think there, if you double that, you probably could use this for farming. But I think if you're doing it for like, where you're really going to land bank, but you're just trying to say, I'm creating this business on top of the land just to kind of hold on to this land for appreciation, I think the IRS is going to weigh in on that.
And just generally land banking is just a no.
Land banking is a no, but again, it's, we need clarification because Congress doesn't want this to be a land banking program, but this revenue ruling and these regulations have kind of opened it up for those questions. But it's not within the spirit of the program, and I think eventually Treasury is going to say, no, you can't land bank. They're probably going to say you have to do some type of significant business on the land, or they're going to come up with some rationale for this acquiring a building in the land. Because what if you sold me land and I said, okay, I want to be under the revenue ruling, so can you put a little building on the land? Then I'm going to buy the land and the building from you, and I'll just double the basis of the building. It's a $10,000 building, and I'm just going to add $10,000 to it. That would be abusive. But like, you know, if you read the regulations where it talks about land in a building, I mean, you're like, okay, well, I did it, you know, but it's just not within the, it's not the advice I'm giving folks.
Yeah, to Mark's point, and to your point, on a straight agricultural deal, you really have to be creative in your structuring on what the operating business is. It's not going to be as simple as, you know, breaking the ground and farming some crop. There would have to be some secondary. You know, a good example would be dairy. You could probably go set up a new dairy farm, you know, or egg production and processing facility, something along those lines. But I think with, you know, enough thought and a business plan, you can probably.
Yeah, like if you're, yeah, like if the business is the dairy farm and you are buying new equipment, you're doing a capital expansion of the dairy farm, and, you know, to the extent you have land, you're improving that land, yes, I think you can do this for that.
What about him?
Huh? Is that what we said? I don't think you could do that for this, even though it's not one of the SID businesses. So.
Because it does provide a different side product on top of that.
Yeah, it's just there's so many other provisions in the tax code that don't have benefits for the hemp industry, you know, so like I think for like depreciation, there are a bunch of other provisions, so I think within the spirit of how the tax code treats the marijuana industry unfavorably, it's kind of the same thing here. So.
And I think, to your point, because hemp does come up in the Colorado context, in the agricultural community, and you see pockets, you certainly see pockets over on the eastern plains where folks are trying to grow hemp under some federal guidance. To a point that Mark raised earlier, this is the first round of regulations on this. There's going to be multiple rounds of regulations. You're going to have a lot of interested elected officials at the federal level who will probably see some benefit both in blue and red districts of making sure that their constituents are, you know, getting the benefit of this, and they're going to have a chance to ask questions or contact other trade associations for them to try to get questions of Treasury. So I would foresee, maybe not in these next few rounds, but as we go down the road, you're going to see, you know, specific questions and things like that. So just keep that in mind as we go.
Yeah.
Just a question on the hot tub facility in Port Pagosa Springs, and our economy runs on hot tub facilities. So, my question is that, especially our tourist economy, and there is some development interest in expanding the footprint of the springs. So, is there a clear definition of what that means?
I've never, so I've never researched that. So we have the same thing for new markets tax credits. So some of these things we've looked into, like we've looked into a growler poly. Can you do, we came to the conclusion you can do that. We've looked at convenience stores that sell lottery tickets, and whether that's considered gambling. But I've never looked into a hot tub facility. Remember, this is from the 80s, so.
And I think at that point, it gives me Mark a little bit of clarity on this. So Pagosa Springs is centered on hot springs.
Yeah, I know. I've been in London.
And so I think that there's probably, to Mark's point, it has been researched, but that is more of a straight real estate deal around there. You can probably structure that to fall into real estate and maybe not so much expansion.
Right, right. I mean, same with massage parlor. Like, what about a massage envy, right? I mean, what about physical therapy? So those are issues, and I know that folks have been comfortable with physical therapy, so.
And I think we have about 10 minutes left. Okay.
Yeah.
Go back to that one slide where it has the layers or the levels.
I think it's there it is.
Okay, so, and forgive me, I admit that I am this is like voting on the one for me.
It's all good.
Okay?
It's all good.
But from the indirect approach, when you look at that the initial opportunity fund has a 90-10%, and then you're saying that they're transferring all that money down to this other fund, and it becomes a 70-30. Is that like a 1-to-1 where they just actually put the money in there and empty it out into this fund?
That's a good question. So for the 90% test, you can have an asset can satisfy that 90%,
Right.
or an interest here. So this interest would satisfy. So if you take all your money and put it into this lower tiered entity,
Right.
and this lower tiered entity doesn't qualify, then you have 0% up here. So you're looking at a pretty steep penalty.
So do you need to keep money in that initial opportunity fund? And then my second question is that's a one-to-one. Do you have a one-to-many? Where maybe like that one opportunity fund
Can do multiple assets?
a couple of different.
Yeah, so that's good, that's a great question. So you can have cash up here, but again, that cash is a bad asset, just like intangible property. So you can only have up to 10% cash up here, so you can have a reserve. And it can have multiple entities underneath here. One of the big issues we have that we're waiting for, so one of the big issues is after 10 years, how do you get your tax-free benefit? And it's for the investors to sell their interest in the fund. So one of the issues we have, we call it the exit issue, and that is the way the statute is written is the tax benefit is only when the investor sells its interest in the fund. Which means if I've got 10 assets underneath the fund,
Right.
and we get past 10 years, we're like, okay, time to liquidate. I've got 10 buyers for each of those assets. As written right now, I can't sell the assets. I need to sell the interest in the fund so I can, I need one buyer to buy all, to buy the fund.
It's smarter for that investor to do a one-to-one.
Yeah, well, so we think this is going to get fixed. This is Senator Scott wrote a letter to Treasury about a month and a half ago saying, hey, there's an exit issue here, and we need to fix that. And so Treasury is looking at whether they have regulatory authority to be able to say, even though the statute says that you sell your interest in the fund, as long as it's after 10 years, the fund can sell assets. There's an issue whether Treasury actually has the authority to do that, or whether we have to go back to Congress and get them to fix it. Either way, we think we're going to get there, because again, this is a bipartisan. When it was a standalone bill, it had bipartisan support. A lot of these areas are both in urban and rural areas, so you're checking the box on both sides of the aisle. And so we think we're going to get there, it's just a question of timing.
Just talk for a couple minutes about, because another option is making equity investment into the business itself. So we want to start. Can you talk about the definition for business? What comprises that being an opportunity zone versus not? Because a lot of businesses are going to have a secondary.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and we're getting back to the slide here. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. I'll do that. Go back to right here. Okay, so if you have an operating business, here's one of, so we talked about the tangible property tax. So if I have an operating business, let's just say it's already in the zone, okay? And it's got old property that's pre-2018, okay? So 70% of my property has to be good property, so that means the business has to go out. But if I've got $1 million of, let me just make it, if I've got $300,000 of bad property, because it's pre-2018, then the business has to go out and buy enough good property, which would be $700,000 to meet that 70-30 test. So that's why if you're in the zone, you have to have an expansion of your tangible property. The next test is your intangible property has to, a substantial portion of it, so that's your software and any type of IP. A substantial portion has to be used in a trade or business. That's easy to meet. But then in the regs, they added this requirement in the opportunity zone. We don't know what that means. We don't know what does that mean. Does that mean your trademarks need to be registered with the trademark office under the address in the zone, or does it mean you have to only license to folks in the zone? We don't think it means that. So this is where we have some questions. The last one is that 50% of your income has to be used in a trade or business. They added the requirements in the zone, and we don't know what that means either. So under new markets, we have the same requirement. Under new markets, there's a test where you look at your employees, and more than 50%, it's either 40% or 50% of the services of your employees have to be in the zone, for new markets, in the census tract. And so there you would weigh your employees' salaries, and you'd figure out how much time they spend in the census tract versus outside the census tract. And then Also in new markets, they have another test. It's an alternative test where if more than 50% of your tangible property that you own or lease is in the zone, you automatically meet this requirement. We think we're going to get the same thing here. But these are issues with the regs, that they came out and put these requirements in without any answers.
I guess the follow-on to directly agriculture, could you make an investment in an agricultural business as opposed to the land?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you can meet these, to the extent it has assets, you have to buy them, expand, So think about it. It meets the spirit of the program, right? They want this to stimulate the economy, right? So they want this to be a cash infusion in a business, and then the business expands, right? Or it's a new business. It's easy to meet this with a new business because you're buying all new assets. So, or this is like a VC program where, which is what Sean Parker was thinking. Silicon Valley, new startup businesses, same thing. I start up a business in the zone, so all this new money comes in, and I buy new assets. So,
I did, yeah. So, golf course, I look at that in a predominantly recreation-based sort of economy. How does that affect ski areas? I mean, those are economic drivers in a community like ours. So, I don't, it's infrastructure.
right.
It brings people in, which supports our whole community. So, how do they look at that?
Well, I think they were talking about golf clubs, right? Like private memberships. I mean, that's really what they were getting at.
And there's all sorts of unique history, real estate development around golf courses. You guys are familiar with that. And I just think that was probably covering what Mark was talking about, and I also want to hedge a little bit. But then, to your point about ski resorts, I was reading an article the other day. The Walton family was looking to deploy some capital around Purgatory and get in there. So, I think, again, there's probably creative deal structuring ways to get around the outside of some of those sin businesses to do more on pure real estate development that might have some benefit from that, but not directly invested.
Yeah, and we're going to get more clarity. So, I mean, they make mention in the new regs that came out that, one, they're proposed, but two, they're working on other regs too. So we're going to probably see within the first year 4 sets of regs. So they will, as folks, they're already providing comments, we're going to get some answers. And so, I think we'll see. They're trying to be as flexible as possible. So perhaps on that golf club thing, they'll say it's for private membership golf clubs, is my guess. Some other folks have questions?
I have a question in that our region has the only 2 tribes in Colorado located here, and both of those tribes have opportunity zone properties. Their land is in opportunity zones. Could you walk through a specific example of how a tribe could actually benefit from the opportunity zone with them not selling their land?
Sure. So we are heavily involved as a law firm in this issue. Because tribal land cannot be sold, as it has to be ground leased. And so these ground leases are usually 65 years plus. And so from the tribe's perspective, they're leasing it to private developers who then develop the land. And so the key thing is the tribes care about this a lot because that's the business model, is leasing to private developers and then, having employment requirements on what happens with respect to the development on that land. And so one of our big issues is, if I have a ground lease, that's not technically qualifying property. So I have a 65-year ground lease, that's not qualifying property. And so the tribes, it was like 3 or 4 months ago, they sent a letter to Treasury saying, hey, can you change that definition of opportunities on business property? So it says acquired by purchase or lease. They can't do that because they don't have the right. That's something that Congress has to do. So the next question is, how do you measure that lease? And so what we're hoping is that they can, in fact, that whole, using the financial statement and using cost, Treasury in the regs even says, in the preamble to the regs, which is kind of their write-up of the regs, they say we're not married to that approach, and if you have a better way to measure this, let us know. Perhaps we can use income tax basis. So our comments to Treasury 2 months ago, before the regs came out, was let's use income tax basis, and those are our comments now that we're going to be sending, saying let's use income tax basis because it clears up that issue, because you have zero income tax basis in a leasehold interest. And so we hope that's where we're going to go and solve this problem. And, you know, so it's interesting, out of the 8,700 census tracts, my understanding is there's almost 800 census tracts that cover tribal land. And this isn't just an issue for the tribes. A lot of states and municipalities selected census tracts because they had state or municipal owned land that they were planning to lease. So this is a real big issue, and I'm confident this is going to get worked out.
Can you only invest capital gains in an opportunity fund?
It's a great, we get this question all the time, whether can I get the 10-year benefit if I don't have a capital gain? Unfortunately, the answer is no. You have to have a gain. And I think Treasury did that for budget purposes, because if they force you to sell something, you generate a gain even though they give you a deferral. So they know they've got some revenue coming in, even though they're giving you the ability to get that tax-free growth, where they're going to lose revenue. So.
We have time for one more question. We'll go back.
Thanks. So how does this influence, say, a high-tech developer investment in affordable housing? Because that's a tax, that's generated by tax code as well. So are these mutually exclusive, or can a high-tech developer take advantage of these things?
So a lot of times when they pass federal incentive programs, they'll come up with a list of what you can't use this with. Like a lot of times they exclude out tax-exempt bonds, right, because they think you're double dipping. We have no exclusions whatsoever. So you can match this with anything, okay? There is an issue right now with residential rental property that we think is going to get worked out. It's a technical issue where we were hoping for clarification that you can use this for residential rental property. We didn't get that in the regs. So there's enough lobbying going on that we think we'll get some clarification, because right now it's a questionable on pure residential rental. You know, it's questionable. I'm very confident it gets worked out.
And to that point, it's in our next speaker we'll talk more about this, because the world he's in on a daily basis. But it's, you know, federal incentives, state incentives, local incentives, just putting your capital stack together to make it work. And so, as Mark said, we're not aware of anything, and we're strongly encouraging all of our clients to turn over every stone to really make the cap stack work. I noted earlier, and this is the problem with giving a lot of these presentations, we don't have all the maps, but I just want to quickly, as Janice showed you, we don't have any on this one. So Janice showed you earlier, and as we mentioned, these are dispersed across the state. And just from point of reference for you all, you got it down here. You then go around the Grand Junction area, into the San Luis Valley, over to southern Colorado and Trinidad, and then into Lamar and Ontario County, up into Sterling and a good chunk of the Northeast. And then you make your way over to Route County and the Craig-Payton area. And then you've got Colorado Springs. Estes Park has one. Colorado Springs. There's quite a few in the Denver area for a whole host of reasons. And then Broomfield. And I think I've just covered everything. But again, you know, to your point, sir, if you're a high-tech investor or affordable housing developer, I mean, all of those areas really present themselves well for affordable housing and other types of projects. So be on the lookout, plan, be willing to kind of move around, because there's a lot of great opportunities in a lot of great rural areas in our state. So thank you.
Well, our time's up, right? So thank you for letting us spend our morning with you, and we're here for you. So any questions, feel free to reach out to
Thank you, guys. We're just going to take Sean, before you come up, if we can just take a quick 5-minute break so everybody can stretch their legs, run to the restroom. And yeah, we'll make sure you have copies of the presentation. And this is all being recorded as well. So this also be a chance to go harass them somewhere.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch. Yeah. We should be working together. So you wear some.
All right, yes. All right, so we're going to get going here. Sean is coming up already, which is good. But Sean is the 4 points funding here at Steamboat, right, Sean? Yeah, he's got an opportunity fund that he started up. They're looking for investments on the western slope, so he'll be here to talk more about his fund, what they're doing, what kind of investments they're looking for, and you can have any questions you have for him as well. So Sean, if you can hold the mic up too.
I got the special instructions. I actually need to speak into this. Hopefully y'all can hear me. I will be fairly quick with what I'm trying to do. And, you know, like the previous speakers, right, we'll open some of this up to Q&A. I'm going to run through just a couple things to clarify. So World Cause, that's the name of our Opportunity Zone Fund. And fund is kind of a magic word because underneath there's a whole bunch of individual things going on. But we've been focused on rural Colorado for a while, and a little bit of confusion about rural cause versus 4 points funding versus the other, 15 plus legal entities that we work on. But a little background about us, you kind of understand how I ended up here even. We're based out of Steamboat Springs. We have been sort of working and investing across the western slope for years now. So primarily real estate, that's sort of how we've been paying the bills. Here's a slide of just count of properties in communities over the past about five and a half years since we moved the real estate portion to Colorado. So we're heavily invested in all of these communities. I mean, emotionally as well as financially. We love Western Colorado. But what we really realized a little over a year ago is we're kind of thinking, what's next? My partners and I, we both have entrepreneurial backgrounds, tech startups, and we were sort of like looking for that next thing. And realized that there was a good opportunity to double down and start connecting with EDC members, stopping by co-working spaces, and just trying to figure out what else is happening in these communities. We already had a fairly unique perspective being in all these places of what towns were able to grab onto the, sort of the economic expansion over the past few years and what ones weren't, and trying to really uncover a little bit of the what and why. And so we set out to sort of purposely start building out the startup ecosystem in the western slope of Colorado. Long list that you certainly don't have to read, but something that kind of sprang out of Boulder, defined in a book, Startup Communities by Brad Feld. There's sort of a list of things that you need, or we believe you need, to have a successful business startup ecosystem. And it's pretty simple things, right? You need a source of funding, you need regular events, you need mentorship, etc. An educational institution. And a group called Capella EDC that they're now running Startup Colorado, same sort of group of guys, dedicated towards connecting our rural mountain towns. Came through with a little chart of, they've been doing a roadshow for a little over a year, going to all these mountain towns to see who had what. And Steamboat had sort of two little blocks in this circular graph filled out. It looked like a smiley face at the time. It was clear that we were pretty deficient, and with no good reason. So as we saw what people were doing in Telluride with the Telluride Venture Accelerator and some of the other communities that were really trying to spin up their ecosystem, we decided to tie into the same communities. And so we created 4 points funding. So that is the business investing side. We started a regular event in Steamboat that we call Steamboat Launch, so every February and August. So this sort of, August 2017, February 2018, August 2018. These are companies that are almost all Western Slope companies. A couple from the Front Range that have some outdoor rec or tie to our community vibe that we brought up to Steamboat to help present to investors in the community at large. And when we sort of made this decision just over a year ago to go down this path, and we came up with Steamboat Launch based again on what they were doing in Telluride. We thought, boy, if we can get a couple of good companies and a handful, 4 or 5 even investors in a room, like it's a start, right? We're gonna have something good. And 6 weeks later, when we held our first Steamboat Launch, we had 5 great Steamboat companies, and 68 people showed up. 25 of them were accredited investors. And we sort of realized, right time, right place, that across the Western Slope, people were really working methodically to network, connect, and grow these mountain communities that we love. And so just in that last year, we've seen some really incredible growth and some great entrepreneurship coming out. And then I get to my duplicate slide because I'm not good at remembering to delete things. We not only started this event, we have been and we will continue to be active investors. So we've made 6 investments over the past year, a couple Telluride companies, a Carbondale, a couple Steamboat. So, you know, we're absolutely trying to take advantage of, you know, all this connecting, networking, and we attend events like Steamboat Launch all over Colorado on a regular basis, trying to continue to move that network forward. And I think it's really vitally important. We've got an entirely different slide deck that shows, you know, what the effect of sort of the lack of startup businesses has done to our rural communities in particular, right? If you don't have jobs that are selling things outside, you are only on the decline, right? Every time you buy a car or go healthcare or order off of Amazon or you know it, it's always outflow. And we really believe firmly that part of restoring our rural communities requires us to restore our businesses. Coming out of the Great Recession, we had a 40-year low in the establishment of new businesses. And you know, the results of that are pretty straightforward to follow through in terms of the negative impact. So with our history of real estate and business investing, when we saw opportunity zones come along, we thought this is absolutely the natural catalyst for us to accelerate what we're already doing. And so we went ahead and founded World Cause. It's been an incredible experience, and I want to thank, you know, OEDIT in particular, but all our community leaders, because Colorado has clearly been at the forefront of this, and we've been sort of the benefactors of being able to be at national conferences and you know, everything else to understand much more of what's going on. And a shout out especially to Southwestern Colorado and Durango. When we launched World Cause, our little one-page thing that I haven't even had time to go back and update in months now, we've had more people sign up from the Southwest region of the state, and Durango in particular, than anywhere else. So, you know, the organization in this room, the turnout, you know, is fantastic, and I really believe you're going to benefit from it for sure. Okay. A little bit about what we originally intended to do, and then I'm going to talk to you about how this, based on guidance, has shuffled a little bit. You know, we recognize most of the money is going to go into real estate. Going back to, we really believe that startup investment is also important. We started with an original idea of a larger real estate fund with a small business sidecar. We'll talk a little bit why, but the equity investing in all the businesses is fundamentally on hold. There's just enough questions left in the guidance that we're pretty confident will get resolved, but they're not now. So we're focusing on the real estate, you know, with an eye in particular on workforce housing, but you know, a lot of commercial and mixed use as well. Focusing just kind of on the bottom here, right? So if we're going to pursue all these things, and we were talking about rural communities, one more building out in the middle of nowhere is not the best way to weather the next downturn. So we're looking for, you know, for projects that create some sort of infill, community transformation, and a common term I think most of us are getting an understanding of creating a sense of place, right? And also with recognition that we're probably not, we're not likely to be the developer. We're going to be partnering with local developers, but I think that there's going to be a community effort with multiple investments that hopefully provide a stacked benefit, right? So I joked a little bit about the holy trinity of the brewery, the pizza place, and the coffee shop, all within walking distance, right? But communities, and Durango obviously has a lot of that going on. A lot of these other rural communities, certainly the smaller ones, they don't have walkable living. They haven't even developed their rural or their outdoor assets, right? And so we're really looking for the communities that have an organized community plan with an understanding of how they're going to place, you know, all this money that can flow in. And then, you know, also working with, going back to that, right, working with the local EDC, and I use that term sort of loosely, and that EDC is a pretty specific thing, but there's a number of community leaders and partners that I think really need to come to the table to do some of the more transformative events. And then on the direct equity investment, you know, we had hoped to be able to raise a VC-like fund. Going back to a lot of what we heard from the previous speakers, there's some questions about interim gains, things, and some restrictions on making sure the businesses stay qualified that really feel like increase the risk of entering the penalty zone on the businesses right now. So we'll see how we get there. But I believe we will. Okay. Just that little bit of like why we set out to do this. I've already sort of covered it, but you know, one, we're already there. If we're going to be investing in businesses anyway, and investing in real estate, it certainly would be nice to do that with the extra incentive of the opportunity zone. But I think also, we've adopted the term impact motivated. I forgot sort of where we first heard it, but we think there is no lasting impact without profit. Going back to if we're not creating sustainable businesses in a place where people want to live and we can continue to grow, that benefit fades away after we pull our dollars back out. But if we can raise thoughtfully jobs and workforce housing and amenities in a community to create a higher level of sustainability, I don't think anybody believes the next decade will see the same kind of economic growth that the past one did. So we think this is super important. And I'm pretty sure we're going to get there because we're seeing a great set of opportunity zone deal flows. This is a little bit of an older map, but just to give some sense, and I'm going to talk through a couple of these examples somewhat specifically, but this sort of excludes the smaller things. These are fairly major redevelopment efforts by communities that may or may not have a full prospectus, but are really organizing. And we have people sort of reaching out on a regular basis. Again, going back to the timeliness and now, and me. There's going to be probably in the next first quarter of next year, I think a real rush to start moving those dollars out. And as that hits, right, everybody's going to be distracted. So unanticipated consequences, accompany just about anything, certainly something this significant. And as everybody focuses on the deals that are shovel ready and what's going on, it's going to be harder and harder to get that attention. So somebody asked earlier about, what's the flow of capital going to look like? I think there's a wall of capital building. We literally have people signing up on the site saying, yeah, I've got $1 million of capital gains to place. You have a place for me, right? My 188 clock is ticking. A very unusual sort of fundraising scenario. But I think that's going to happen, that capital is going to be there, but we don't have enough people swinging hammers, right? I can't get an electrician or a plumber to show up on our properties today. What happens when we unleash this wall of capital and everybody's trying to build their new apartment complexes and everything else? So I think there's going to see a big bubble. We're all going to have to slow down and sort of collect ourselves, and then a steady sort of investment through 2026. But it's really interesting to see the activity building for sure. Okay. And so that's a little bit about us, right? We've been working for almost this calendar year to sort of connect, to make sure we can stay as in front of the regs as possible, and mostly focusing, frankly, on deal flow, just because we think that's what's going to enable us to move forward the best. But we talked a little bit about what does a deal look like? What kinds of things are we seeing? What sort of returns? What's the the investment and exit timeline? So I thought I'd just sort of walk through a couple of these. We say we're going to do real estate. We've already talked about some of these things in terms of the test, the 31 months to deploy your capital, all of those stuff. Part of what's really holding things up right now is our lack of understanding of interim gains and the impact of debt and appreciation. So going back to some questions were asked about multi-asset, funds, that sort of thing, and who wants to leave their money into anything for 10 plus years. There's definitely some challenges there, but we think there's a real opportunity to place that patient capital in individual deals. So what we're proceeding right now, and what we think the regs will allow us to do, is to raise capital for specific projects, and it's going to be on a per project basis. We'll take our deal funnel, raise the top 1 or 2, and go try to fill that capital stack with the expectation that it's a 10 plus year hold, and realistically say 15-year hold so that you can sell off at a time when the market is favorable. But we'll be raising for a number of sort of larger deals on a per project basis, with the hopes that as the regs become more favorable, right, a lot more opportunity will open up to structure things a little more flexibly. So some examples, right? Basic rehabilitation, and I'm kind of going to go. I only have a few samples, and this is where for sure, please, ask questions, etc. But kind of go on that small to large, just to call a couple things out. So that top picture actually is the first opportunity zone property that we bought under the Rural Cause entity, right? And so it's a path of progress commercial property that's not really commercial outside of Delta. There's people that are trying to operate businesses on either side of this, There's a double-wide residential on 5 acres with a bunch of sort of broken down trailers. You know, and our intention is to clean that up. We think we can double the basis. There are some questions about, thank you, hard to, there, we can see. Yeah, so, you know, it is a blight. You know, I think we heard before, right, single family rentals have some real question marks right now. But in this case, especially being commercial, one, that's a risk we're willing to take. This is relatively inexpensive. We can easily double our basis in the building because almost all of the value is in the land. We can remove some blight and we give ourselves a window then to look for converting that to commercial. And I thought it was kind of important to call that one out in particular because there will be a lot of discussion about institutional money and large funds. We talked to national funds on the regular $100+ million funds looking to place money. They can't do things that are under $100,000. But, you know, individual investors or, right, maybe even a group of friends that, you know, may want to get together and work on this, I think there's a real positive impact that can come from finding these blighted areas that are in the zone, getting them turned, and, you know, maintaining them for 10 years is a good opportunity. And then a lot of buildings like this one on the bottom here, a slightly larger rehab, but still single structure. You probably have one party, you know, a few $1 million sort of, you know, to provide the capital for that. But, you know, these kinds of buildings we see all over the place. This is an old armory building in Delta. There's the Beat Factory in Grand Junction right across from the new Las Colonias development. Lots of these old structures with tons of character. A lot of them adjacent to, you know, what would be the cute downtown corridor, right, that they're trying to revitalize anyway. Great opportunity to rehabilitate these because your 1X is, you know, it's kind of a slam dunk. These buildings are out there for on the cheap, or at least they were. We're seeing a lot of reports going back to the momentum, in particular in New Jersey, but a lot of places where land value in these buildings are already accelerating because people are going to try to secure the property with the assumption that they're going to be able to, even if they don't treat it as an opportunity zone investment, the value will go up for an opportunity zone investor to come in and buy. So there's some timeliness, but there's a ton of these opportunities out there, and I think it's the way that on a local level, sort of the most good can be done for a lot of communities. You know, second one, right, we've got a fair number of communities out there that they've got studies that were several years old showing, you know, they're short 1,200 beds, you know, in a town of, you know, 10,000 people, right? The housing shortage in some of these communities is really extraordinary, but they were never able to quite get the capital just because people weren't even looking. And so all of these sort of projects, they're having, you know, they're pulling them off the shelf and going out and aggressively pursuing these opportunity zone dollars. And, you know, we're confident a number of these are going to come through. As you step up, you know, back to now this is new land development, you start to get into an area where we're not seeing any of these that are, you know, just an individual is going to go pick up and run with on their own. And I don't know how clear it was in the previous conversations, but being a qualified opportunity zone fund, it is self-certifying. If you want to go through the brain damage, et cetera, an individual can, you know, make themselves a fund and go off and pursue investment, and go do some of those small individual properties. By the time you get here, everything that we're seeing has sort of at least local and regional support, tax benefits. We see communities like Montrose where they've waived tap fees for their Colorado Outdoors project. They work with GoCo to get trails put in. By the time you get into this level, I think that stuff is going to be mandatory, and we certainly see enough of it in terms of, you know, the existing projects where people, they were kind of shovel-ready rolling into 2018, and now they've really packaged it up with layered benefits for, you know, every incentive they can conceivably get for the area. In a really organized package. And so I think if anybody wants to pursue things at this level, it requires a coordinated effort. And even if one party may bring the capital stack, there's a lot of other people working with the developer and the community to make sure the right thing going in the right place with the maximum benefits. And then one of the things that's most interesting to me, and of course we're seeing a little bit less of this, but there's certainly a few communities that have you know, massive redevelopment efforts going on. You know, I already mentioned Montrose. I think Gavon's going to fall in that category. certainly Grand Junction is, where they already have designated areas with plans laid out. And a lot of the questions that we get is, right, will there be co-investing, multiple partnerships going in individual pieces? And certainly in this case, what happens if, I'm the landowner. So somebody that's been sitting on 160 acres of riverfront for a decade finally now knows they want to go develop it. And I think under this scenario, most of what we're seeing, right, there's this related party issue. So if somebody's been holding on to this property and they're finally ready to go do this massive redevelopment, at least the couple we're talking to, it's probably going to be parcels that will be sold off for development by individual groups. Less likely that one group is going to come in and develop all 160 acres, although certainly conceivable. But there will be multiple developers, and again, going back to, there's a thoughtful plan that will include walkable space, retail, maybe light manufacturing, and this larger build out. And I think people are going to be coming in and taking individual pieces of this. And again, we're seeing this in a few communities. So the extent that the sort of larger efforts, are there, not just, again, Durango being kind of a special beast, but as you look at some of the surrounding communities, you really want to reshape yourself. I think this is absolutely a generational opportunity to kind of figure out who you want to be as a town, when you grow up. This is the way that it could get done, leading into 2026. That's certainly where I'm at. Okay. And then on the opportunity zone businesses, again, this sort of all these tests, the 90%, the 70% of tangible assets. This is a really wonky one, the 50% of revenue generated in the zone, and we already called those out. The reality is, it's just too tough to think right now you're going to be able to qualify for all of those things for 10 years in most businesses that would be highly investable. I think that there's some opportunity for very hyper-local businesses that need relatively small amount of capital. When you talk about startups that are looking for some sort of export, there's just too many things pulling on those businesses. So I brought up a couple examples. So we have real-world examples of all of these that are in the zone. The sort of local manufacturing, and we brought up ag processing, right? So West Slope Organics, they want to put themselves in Delta. They want to be able to do IQF, individually quick frozen peaches and other produce. So they've got a great pitch showing that we literally put tons of peaches every year into the river or into compost piles because they just can't make it to market fast enough. They may be perfect or they're slightly imperfect, but they're perfectly edible and delicious. Those farmers take a huge loss, right? Because they are a manufacturing facility, we could conceivably go, our original plan, we could go create a build-to-suit facility, right? So we would build the facility, build it out, or go buy one and do the build-out, which would do our 1X, and then take an equity stake in the company to move them in. But to think that they're going to be able to meet all of these requirements and we can hold for 10 years and a bunch of things is a limiting factor. But at least I feel like local manufacturing has some real potential. Unfortunately, that's the sort of the smaller set of businesses that we see seeking investment. Could be just because of our bubble. Remote manufacturing, things like Western Rise, right, based out of Telluride. They basically order their fabric offshore. It gets sewn in Portugal and LA. Right, there's drop shipping going on. If they have a pallet of pants that's worth as much as the office they lease, or probably 10 times more, because there's a few of them and sitting behind a desk, could they ever qualify? And I think sort of as things stand, I'm not sure that they will be able to. All right, and so for a huge, and that's really important for us because obviously we're courting outdoor rec in a very big way. If you're a startup outdoor rec company, you probably have very little of your business in your headquarters if you're in rural Colorado, right? And so I'm really confident that a lot of this will be addressed, but I think there's real challenges right now, and until we get much further into the year and get a couple more rounds of guidance, that may not sort out the way we'd like it to. And then, software we touched upon, again, with the number of acquisitions and, you know, the pull to move and where's your revenue being generated. I think a lot of questions. I think Durango's got a pretty good fintech industry, from my understanding. Definitely some challenges there. And I threw up the brewery with the question mark, so it's on the sin business. But we've actually had several breweries approach us about relocating, you know, to some of these new developments within an opportunity zone. And I think this is one of the things that, I don't know if it was part of the intention, but I'm not sure how clear it was. We've got a lot of businesses. If you're going to do that 160-acre build out with mixed use and a bunch of things, there are a lot of companies looking at moving into those zones. They're typically getting, you know, a whole bunch of other stacked benefits like, you know, jumpstart credits, and, you know, so their employees can defer taxes for a year, enterprise zone, you name it, as well as trying to get that equity investment to help them upgrade their facility and move their business forward. Breweries happens to be one of those. And it's not clear yet whether that would qualify or not, but since it comes up with me often, I thought I would throw that in. They are shipping, you know, alcohol typically, but since they're shipping for resale and not for direct consumption off-site, that's in the maybe zone. So I'm hoping that works out because we want breweries in every community we're developing. Right? So just a quick, for me, my team, you'll see us, we are on constant road shows. Just to be abundantly clear, if I wasn't, right, we're actively raising. We probably won't be accepting checks for weeks to January 1st, depending on how much I can convince Mark that we're ready to go. But you know, we obviously pulled this pipeline, and I'd love to connect with not only anybody that'd like to, you know, invest sort of across rural Colorado and selectively beyond, but for deals that are here that you think maybe we could play a part in that capital stack. So. That's, I think, actually it. Tried to fly through. Thank you very much. We'll do some Q&A, yeah?
Is Jason still here? I see his coat. Colleen, is Jason here? Is he taking his time? Well, if nothing else, we can start with the Q&A for Jana and Sean, and I'll go see if I can track down Jason and get him back here too as well. But I'm going to hand you guys the microphone, and feel free to start throwing. I think you know a lot. I think both of you know a lot. There he is. I knew you wouldn't leave without your coat. But this is going to be the general Q&A, so whatever questions you still have hanging out there, feel free to ask them at this point. They can come to any three or all three of you as you see fit. But I'm just going to hand you the microphone here, Jana. So.
I've heard you mention enterprise zone versus opportunity zone.
So as Mark mentioned, there's no there's no restrictions on how they work together. Basically, they both operate independently, so whatever you're doing in them has to qualify for both benefits, but there are areas where they overlap, and then you can get both benefits, assuming you qualify under both programs.
So the opportunity zone is only a federal program, and the enterprise zone is a state?
Yes. Yes.
And good to clarify too. So state by state, I think the states opted whether they would sort of follow on and give the same benefits at the state level, and Colorado did not. They felt that there was enough incentive.
No, for opportunity zones?
Yeah.
No, in Colorado, the capital gains benefits automatically flows through. So if you don't pay, if you're deferring your capital gains at the federal level, you don't pay at the state level either. No, we're
she's a state.
yeah, yeah. So if you wouldn't have to pay state capital gains if it's an opportunity zone investment at the federal level.
What kind of market rate return are investors looking for in a housing type project?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. You know, I think one of the things, opportunity zone, back to the 2-1 chest, this is one way to benefit. I think anything that applied before opportunity zones applies today. So there are clearly impact investors out there that, you know, they're very happy with 7% return. You know, that exists. I think most of the deals we've seen pitched, you know, 8 to 17. Now, granted, that's PPMs that people are trying to sell us on, so you can dial that down where you want, but you know, I really think that 10 to 17 is a starting target for most money, just because that's where so many deals are sitting right now, and deals that can have positive impact. So, you know, depending on the investor, clearly that scale slides.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And again, it goes to part of that conversation of, is this going to be a captive fund where you're the only, or you and one other person are the only members in there, and you have kind of more control exactly what you're doing? Or are you getting sold on a PPM, and then you have to understand what your risk tolerance is and understand the risk and the downside of the investment. So every deal is going to be different. Every deal is going to pitch different returns. You know, on some of those, depending on what the investment type they're looking for, they have to satisfy various disclosure requirements, and so it's a deal by deal term in what your comfort level is.
But the hope, by doing a market-based approach here, right, by having many funds and subsidizing the investors, that the hope is that you create this patient, lower cost capital, and that is that since the federal government is subsidizing the investors, that the investors would take less than a market rate return, and that hopefully the fund, when they're investing in the projects, would require less of a return themselves, right? And so ultimately the developers are getting, you know, more patient capital at a lower cost capital. That is the hope.
Yeah.
I'll throw one more thing in there, right? So I mean, I think in general, that scale of expected returns, it's still there. It maybe slid down a notch, right, based on the expected incentives. But the other thing that's a question, I don't think anybody can completely model out expected returns right now, right? Because of these things, like we don't know there's no debt depreciation recapture. We don't exactly know what that is. We think we do, but so we're kind of proceeding with, you know, in our initial modeling, taking, you know, clearly it needs to be a good investment without the opportunity zone. We're confident we're going to get some juice out of that, right? And so will that be, you know, some percentage based on debt, or will it be full forgiveness of loans? And we're taking a very conservative view of, you know, kind of showing both sides of that and working towards the general end. As things evolve, that door might open up even more, right? If we get very favorable guidance and things become clear, that required return might drop even a little more. We're starting with, it's a great deal without the opportunity zone. Here's where we think we can, you know, get some extra.
As Janice said earlier, and we've heard numerous times, this isn't to make bad projects good. This is to make good projects either better or great. So you got to make sure it's a good project without.
What's the definition of a related party?
It's more than it is more than 20%.
Yeah, I think it is.
So if you look at the buyer and the seller, and you say you have more than 20% overlapping ownership. So if you have that, then you have a related party sale.
Well, so this is one we see most of all, right? There's a lot of people, like I mentioned in my slides, that have been sitting on a property that's prime development for years, and finally they see this opportunity, right? They're ready emotionally to take that step, but they all want to hang on to a piece of it, right? And so you can't hold on to more than 20% of the equity stake in the go forward.
If you sell it.
Yeah, right.
And they have these attribution rules. So like if I sell property to a fund and I take a 18% interest in the fund, but then my brother takes a 10% interest in the fund, then I'm deemed to own what my brother owns, so now we have a related party transaction. So they don't make it easy.
What about cousins?
That's a good, I don't think I've looked at cousins. I think cousins might be okay.
Yeah, with the depreciation recapture issue, so as I understand what I think you said, is that once you depreciate an asset, that depreciated amount is not recaptured at the time of the tax deferral. Is that correct?
No, so the way it works is when you sell your asset for a gain, so if you have real estate that's depreciated, so it's depreciated real estate. So now, you used to have like fast depreciating real estate assets. I forgot what year, it was before I started practicing. And so you still have some of that out there. But all the new stuff is all straight line depreciation, 40 years or 27 and a half. That recaptures for individuals, that qualifies. So with respect to that, but if I have recapture on, because that's not considered ordinary income, it's actually considered a capital gain, but instead of 20%, it's 25%. But if I have like a piece of equipment that I sell, and I have depreciated that down, that's ordinary income, that does not qualify, that's not a gain for this purpose.
Okay.
Understands everything.
So it sounds like there's still some uncertainty in some of these areas, and it also sounds like to take full advantage of the program, the investors are kind of have to get in within the next year. Now, with that uncertainty in that short timeline, are you guys seeing any issues with investors maybe kind of looking at it and saying, well, I don't know if I'm going to pull the trigger just yet because of the uncertainty, or is that an issue? Or
I think for the smart investors, yeah, you better be careful. And I've heard a lot about making sure you get qualified opinions and really make sure, like, for us, if you're doing raising at the fund level, honoring your fiduciary responsibility to make exactly clear what the risks are in this investment. I think there's a little bit of the flip side where people are so eager to take advantage of this that they're really pushing to get their money in maybe before they should.
Yeah, too
eager. Yeah, they're too eager. And you got a whole year to still capture the full benefit with the 15% increase in basis and everything else. And we're going to see more guidance. And the deals are out there. So it's frothy right now. And I'm one of those people where I'm like, yeah, let's make sure we've got our deal funnel lined up, because when it's time to pull the trigger, I don't want to be behind everybody, right? But I think there's some real responsibility there, and we'll know even more over the next couple months. That's where we hit the spot where we feel comfortable. There's a certain middle of the road real estate that you expect to hold for 10 plus years, kind of standard model that we're confident enough to move forward, and at least accepting those soft commits with the expectation of real checks coming soon. Anything else that's like, hey, our plan is to do a whole bunch of condos, and we're going to build the first 5, and we're going to sell those to build the next 5, to build the next 5, right? Like those kinds of models may not work. And so there's a limit to what you can do, but there's also we bought our property in Delta. I think it's super safe. It's fairly low risk. Even for the dollar amount, we don't get the benefit. It's not that big of a deal. It's still a good investment. So that part, I think, is to go forward. There's a whole swath of things that hopefully by the first quarter of next year we'll have a really good line on.
And I think Mark, you're certainly seeing this in Phoenix, and I'm seeing it in Denver. You see a different risk tolerance to all the issues that were just raised, depending on how you're going to manage a fund. Are you and a partner just setting up a fund, and it's just the two of you, or are you soliciting outside investment? Because once you start soliciting outside investment, there are some unknowns. And you better be in a real safe kind of spot where you can feel comfortable. And Mark, what's our last count on all of our disclosures on?
It's like 25 risk factors.
25 risk factors for an investor. For our clients, when they're soliciting funds that their investors have to think about. And one of them is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
The flip side is, right, so we've got PPMs in front of us that promise a 17% return, right? I may not buy that, but it's a great building that's going to get stuff built all around it. It's a very competitive without the opportunity zone. So back to risk tolerance, we may say, hey, we're investing in this as a non-opportunity zone thing. We're going to say we're a qualified opportunity zone fund. We hope to get this benefit, and here's where it goes if we do. But if we don't, this is a safe real estate investment in an area we know is going to be developed. I think that's where a lot of these other communities are going to start.
But it has to be a good project.
It has to be a good project, especially in ROI.
Yeah. But it's got a lot of runway in this program. If you don't invest by the end of 2019, you go from a 15% reduction to a 10%. It's not, you have plenty of time to invest, and so maybe some people are overreacting, thinking they have to get in right this second.
And that's out to 2021, right?
Yeah.
So there's
plenty of time, and this is a brand new industry, so it takes time for IRS gives us guidance, we give them comments, they're working hard. They're going to turn around new comments again by the end of the year or early next year. And then I would say in the first year, you're going to see 3 or 4 rounds of comments. So, we're going to get there. So,
and to that point too, and Mark raised this earlier, if you're going to take the approach where you see it's a good project with or without it, and if you get the benefits from the opportunity zone, great. If you don't, great. But as you're evaluating those, one thing we're telling all of our clients, even large or publicly traded companies who are entertaining this, where does your accountant stand on being able to track all this and certify and give all those tests that need, because that is something as an investor you got to think through. It's one thing if you're just going out and finding the projects, but you need to kind of have those advisors around you that can make sure you're going to go get that benefit.
And there's a few accounting groups launching OZ, specialized back-end fund management, that sort of thing, of course, right?
Yeah.
I have a question about the zone designation here in the Durango area. Looking at the map, there's a whole bunch of public land included here, and then there's other areas where it carves off like half of somebody's property. And then we have a couple areas here which I would call real opportunity areas that are dying investment that we can't get, but they're not in here. And I know there's specific criteria, but is there opportunities to revise or amend this zone designation?
Yeah, so unfortunately there's not. These have all been certified by Treasury for the next 10 years, and there's just no ability, unless Congress reauthorizes the law. And the boundaries are also based on census tract boundaries.
And I guess I can do that, but I wanted to ask the question.
Yeah.
We're missing some real opportunities.
Yeah, and that's certainly true, and that's certainly true kind of for a variety of different reasons across the state. We made our best effort to make these designations, and there's a bunch of factors in a short period of time. What I will say, though, is that even though properties that are outside the opportunity zone can't always directly benefit from the incentive, we're encouraging communities to think more holistically about how they can create kind of crossover benefits. So if there's an area nearby that's really primed for retail and businesses, can we build some workforce housing in the opportunity zone that then makes those business sites more attractive to businesses because they know that their workers will have somewhere to live. So kind of some of those things to create a true community benefit. But at the very base level, if a property is not within an opportunity zone, they can't directly get the incentive, and there's nothing that we can do to change that.
But there's a good chance that this only covers 11% of the census tract, so if we get some momentum, there's a good chance that we'll get another round. It's not something we're thinking we're going to have in a year, but perhaps in 2 or 3 years, where we get another round that can cover, another 4 to 5%, because again, it's only 11%. And so I've already started talking to folks in Congress, that represent areas that were upset that they didn't get chosen, and to see if that we would kind of get check the temperature to see if they would support another round, and I've only had positive conversations.
And as we mentioned earlier, there's, especially in Colorado, and we're not the only state who did it that way, there's such a great disbursement between the rural and the urban areas that you're creating a lot of incentive for those elected officials. If we can get momentum and we can show a track record in these communities, it's a much easier story to tell at the legislative level as to why this program needs to be reauthorized. And that's both at a local level, an individual level, and then even percolating up to the governor's office to go carry that banner for the state. So I'm with Mark. There's no guarantees on that, but I'm very optimistic. I think we're going to see an expansion of the program once we develop a track record.
So I've got a follow-up to this question, which is one of our census tracts is designated here as the traditional tribal boundary, and it cuts right through the middle of several parcels. How are parcels being treated when part of it is in the property and you want to develop it to create an opportunity zone? Some in, some's out. What do we do?
So we did a white paper on this a couple months ago. So we were looking at a resort that was within and without, and so we do think that we still need some definitions of the word substantially all. It means 70% at one of the so there's a substantially all of a substantially all of a substantially all. We only have the definition for the first one. And so we think perhaps that once we have, which will probably be the second round, it'll be like something like as long as, you know, if you have one property, as long as like 70% or, you know, 60-something% is in the zone, the whole project will qualify. But right now, that's an open issue.
I just had some clarification. Region 9 was involved with getting the opportunity zones approved in our region. And honestly, the two that are in La Plata County, there were only 4 that were eligible. And so we had to kind of look at where the most opportunity was. And obviously, anything that had some municipality in it was, you know, top priority. Most of Durango, unfortunately, is not even eligible. I mean, just because their census tracts don't meet the distress criteria and some of those federal designations. So even if we had another round, there are areas that will not be eligible. And then in some of our other counties, both San Juan and Dolores are completely in the enterprise zone, and they're one census tract because of their low population. So that was an easy one. But that process is what it is too.
2 questions. What happens if your taxpayer dies before 2026, and then on the 10-year full step up, did you say depreciation does or does not get the recapture in the full 10-year?
So we were talking about getting into the program, right? If you sold an asset with depreciation,
yeah,
if it's real estate, that's good. If it's non,
what about after the 10 years?
Yeah, after the 10 years. We don't know the answer to that. If you have an asset that has depreciated, we don't know, you know, and you get it definitely on the growth of the asset. So it's a big set. So if I buy an asset for $10 million, it's worth $20 million, but it's got a tax basis of 5 because I've depreciated it down. We don't know if you get it on the full 15, the step up, or we know for sure you get it on the 10. So that's one of the open issues on this. And the death one, I'm not an estate planner, but I've spoken to one of my estate planners, and he specifically said, well, it's not a good situation for numerous reasons. But there's some income hits. I don't know any, again, I don't do estate planning, but it's called income with respect to a decedent. So it is, my understanding is kind of a mixed bag for your heirs. Like there might be some income you get, but you might still get the 10-year benefit, but it might be like a full acceleration of that deferred gain.
And to the point we mentioned earlier about, you know, you could see, again, if it was on an individual or a captive side, you could see some real benefit in doing some long-term strategic estate planning to avoid that situation specifically. You know, you get into the LLC or the trust or however you want to do it. So I think, again, to my point about you want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right advisors, both legal and accounting side. You're going to want to think through those issues before just kind of jumping into this.
Any questions? I think you touched on this, but if a fund's equity stake is solely in real estate, there are no restrictions on like the underlying business operating in that building, or
so
you can this in business be
yeah.
tenant.
So that's so in the new markets tax credit area, they do have. So they've taken the same language in the regs we have for that program, and they've expanded it to the tenants on the sin business. So they haven't done that yet here. But I see the regulations. So Treasury has statutory or regulatory approval to have anti-abuse regulations, and so I could see them expanding that to cover tenants. I mean, at least I'm telling clients expect that right now.
Well, with any tenant, right? Maybe mentioned triple net lease of any kind is a question.
Yeah, there's a question on triple net leasing because remember you have to be in the active conduct of a trader business. And so there's some comparative programs. The I think it's like the Gulf Opportunity Zone program or DC Enterprise Zone program. They have the same language, and their Treasury has said if you have one tenant and you know if you have one building, one tenant, and you're triple net leasing it, it's not considered active. And so, but in new markets, we have the same language, and all that means is you have to have gross revenue within 3 years. So Treasury didn't give us the answer to that question either. We think that, you know, so if you have a triple net lease, one tenant, one building, I'd take caution on this for right now.
For the, my clarity too, right? One building, multiple tenants, right? If you're like a large mixed-use retail and
it's all triple net lease.
It's all triple net
It's a
lease.
better situation.
It's a better situation because it has to be more active in order
Yeah,
to
you
manage
can do
multiple
something
tenants.
So I'm assuming that if you're lucky enough to have a really great investor, they could put some in initially and then the next year do it again and keep the flow of income coming in and then take the taxes out as they come.
Actually, I meant to talk about that in our thing. I think I have an expectation at least that, so some of the apartment complexes we're looking at as an example, right? They're maybe approved for, you know, the first 94 unit, whatever, but expandable up to 300. And so because there are timelines, you have your 31 months, you know, to collect and deploy your capital and written plan and all of that stuff. The other thing that's going on is because investors have 180 days, come from more like the VC tech world where, you know, you raise a, you know, $100 million fund, you don't really raise it, or at least you don't collect all that money, you do capital calls along the way. And you can't really do that when it's capital gains, right? People want to get out when they have the gains, right? The market goes down, that money evaporates, so you can't hold their feet to the fire on that. So
Right, but the next year they have
every
capital
investor
gains.
has a different one in a 180-day period, and so, you know, like, I think the likely scenario for us would be we raise for, you know, project one, apartment building one is, you know, the first 94 units. 6 months, 9 months later, we're ready to go on to that second set, and we would raise a second tranche. So we could create a couple windows and a couple of roll-up periods. Because otherwise, you know, if you have to raise enough money for something that's actually going to take you 5 years to build, and you run into challenges with your basis, I think you're going to have to start structuring things such that you can have multiple tranches of investment for a number of projects, which could also create some risk, right? If you're planning on raising a couple, you know, 2 years down the line, and the market has a significant downturn, and the gains aren't there, right? Maybe you can't finish your project. So you need to carefully insulate yourself to make sure you get to some finish line. But otherwise, I don't know of any restrictions to say you could, you know, a business could issue, you know, stock and sell part of it this year and another part next year.
Any more questions?
So when you're talking about land improvements, are you talking about just the building or infrastructure as well?
Anything that would add to the basis. So infrastructure would normally, would add to the basis.
That's the final call question. You can talk to them afterwards as well. Any questions? Except for Mark, Mark's going to let him down. So, any more tax accounting questions? Here's your chance. We're going to wrap up here with Laura telling you about community perspectives and next steps for South Colorado, and then we can just go to open floor. So thank you all for being here. Your time as well.
I'm going to try to make it worth your while for waiting through this whole day. So basically what I'm going to talk about is tell you the Opportunities Zone role of Region 9 and our county level economic developers, and the fact that we've been working on county level prospectuses that you can use to build off of as you work on your projects. And also, just so you know, I'm not quite sure what happened here. Oh well. So just so you know, we are being filmed by its Mesa Media Productions, and this has been live streamed, and we'll also have a recording that will be available on our website, so if anybody needs to look at this down the road or get more information, we're happy to help. So basically what Region 9's role is in the Opportunity Zone is we want Opportunity Zone investment in the region. And so on our webpage, which is scan.org, we have an incentive tab, and under that you will find Opportunity Zones. And we are going to use that to promote any local projects as they come up. any investors that are seeking local projects. If you're an investor and you want to fund locally, we will be having that on our website. We'll be working really closely with OEDIT because they have an amazing website that we already link to, and we'll make sure that we're collaborating. But we're focused solely on promoting investment in our region. We have maps of each of the county's opportunity zones. So in our 5 counties, we have 6 opportunity zones. We feel really lucky that we got one for every county at minimum. Because as you know, with the number of census tracts, that was hard to do. Resources, we're going to have like the video from today. We have presentations. We will post these presentations today. Links to other websites, information, obviously connecting you to funding and technical assistance resources. So Jana mentioned that OEDIT is going to have some technical assistance to work on prospectuses with projects. We'll also have information for the communities on DOLA. They will have some funding to help you get your county level prospectuses done and prospectuses for each of the opportunity zones. So what is going around is a sample of La Plata County's draft prospectus. So what we did is we are making one for each opportunity zone. And so basically, the table of contents there just includes what we have information on. But if you picked up one of the draft outlines when you came in, that is an outline of the prospectuses that we received from OEDIT. And so on our website, we will have these draft prospectuses in Word that you can take and you can update, you can add your own projects to. So for some of the smaller counties, they're going to do a county level prospectus and add all of their projects that they have in the county on a prospectus that they can give to investors. And then we will also be doing that per project. So if you have an individual project, you can take any of this information, the data, the community background, pertinent information, build on it. If you're doing a housing project and you need more specific housing data, we can help you with that. We can kind of build areas that you need more information on. But this is kind of the template, and we just wanted to show you that we would have the maps in there, we would have basic demographic data, and that we will try to promote these prospectuses on not only our webpage, but with other OEDITs when they have their webpage going, as well as any other opportunity that comes up. 4 Points, we'll send them all to 4 Points. And kind of see how we can get some investment in our region. And this is not copyrighted. I mean, make it your own. If you don't want to have commuter data in there, take it out. If you need additional data, put it in. So this is a tool for you to use, and we felt like we had some of this initial overview data that you could take and, again, make it your own. Let's see here. So the technical assistance that we're able to provide you is obviously providing specific data resources. If you need a little more specifics that would focus your project, let us know. Also, hopefully when you signed in, you gave us your email. We will keep you updated if there's webinars, new information that's coming out, more regulations from the IRS, you name it. We will send that to you. We can also send you links when there's new information on the website in terms of investment as well as projects. But I do recommend that you work with the economic developer in your county, and I'm going to put up their contact information because they will actually help you review and refine your prospectus. And then also if you're looking for specific technical assistance, whether it's legal, etc., you can contact them and they can help refer you.
And I'll also jump in and say I'm happy to speak with anyone working on this or connect with some of the statewide resources that we know of. But definitely start with your local community folks.
There's only one Jana, and she's on a road tour for the next week. So these are your county-specific economic development groups, so you can start with them. You can call us. Just so you know, all of the prospectuses, the one for each county, they're being uploaded as we speak. So by end of day Thursday, all of them will be there that you can take and use. And this is just an example to kind of show you what we're looking at for the prospectus. And again, you can expand and contract it as needed. So do you have any questions for me? I guess I'll turn it back over to Roger to kind of finish us off. But I really appreciate it if you need any help. I'll just acknowledge Region 9 staff and many of the economic developers are in the room. I know Gus is, Rob is here, actually Mel with Silverton is here, and Mary Jo with Pagosa Springs, so please outreach them as well.
Well, thank you all for coming this morning. Hope you found this very informative. I think we have the room till 11:30. Is that correct, Colleen? Okay, so the room's here until 11:30. So if you have any questions or you just want to keep talking or talk to our presenters, feel free to do so. We'll kind of give you a heads up when it's time to peel out of here, but I really appreciate it. And of course, if you have any questions for Region 9 or us, there's our contact information too. So thank you and have a great day.